Okay, it's 7 o'clock, Monday, May 9th, and I'll call this meeting of the Urbana City Council Committee of the Whole to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons?
Here.
Mr. Brown?
Here.
Mr. Jacobson?
Here.
Mr. Madigan, who's absent and did call. Ms. Marlin?
Here.
Mr. Roberts?
Here.
Mr. Smythe? Here. Mayor Pressing?
Here.
First, we have approval of minutes of the previous meeting from April 25th. Is there a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
Moved by Marlin, seconded by Roberts. Any discussion? Corrections? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Additions to the agenda, I have one request to move item 11, the discussion of the ambulance changes in the ordinance, up above the discussion of fees, so it would come after item 8. Is there any objections to that?
No.
Seeing none, are there any other additions or corrections to the agenda? Okay, I have public input. I have two people that have submitted forms so far. Reverend Evelyn Underwood and Bishop King James Underwood do not wish to speak, but they're still concerned about the Dr. Ellis sewer problems. And Esther Pat.
Hello, my name is Esther Pat, and I live at 706 South Kohler Avenue. I just wanted to share with you my opinions on a couple of items on the agenda tonight. I see you're going to be discussing lowering the ticket amount for possession of paraphernalia, which I think obviously makes sense. If you're lowering the fine for having a substance, you should lower the fine for having the pipe when you don't have the substance. But I'm concerned that you're limiting it only to what you think is a cannabis pipe. I'm not sure, I'm no expert, but I don't know how one tells whether if a person has no substance on them and only has a pipe, whether the pipe is for cannabis or crack cocaine or meth or anything else that one can smoke. But I think the main point is if a person's not even in possession of a controlled substance, to do anything more than ticket them for having something that could be used were they only in possession seems to me very unreasonable. I mean, a $300 fine for just having a pipe. And when I think of, I mean, what's in your purse? I mean, someone could not use the pipe for the last 4 months and it's still sitting in their purse. So please keep that in mind. The other issue is it's extending the time on fines. And I may misunderstand this, but what I read in the packet online is that you're proposing changing from 14 to 28 days the number of days a person has to pay a fine prior to being taken to court, and that it has to be paid in full. And if that is the case, I would just like to encourage you to go with that spirit, but you need more than 28 days if you're talking about fines of $300. And I think when we look at the whole issue of racial disparity in the criminal justice system, separate from the traffic stops, one really, to me, very compelling issue is the nexus between the gross income inequality based on race in the United States and the higher incidence of people who are African American getting tickets for things. A $300 ticket to every one of you might be, ouch, oh, but it doesn't really hurt you. I mean, you know, it's just $300 you might have spent on other things that you spend things on that you wouldn't. I, in the course of my life, have had contact with many, many people who become homeless because they are $300 or less short on their rent. It takes a long time for someone whose annual income is $16,800 and who's trying to pay rent on a 2-bedroom apartment for 2 kids to come up with $300. So I hope that you will change that so that a person who gets a fine like $300 for whatever has a longer opportunity to pay without being taken to court. Otherwise, I mean, what we have now is a criminal justice system that is grossly unfair to lower income people because of fine amounts being set by people whose household incomes are more in the $50,000 up range, when so many of the people getting hit by that are below the poverty level, income level. So thank you very much for allowing me to speak to you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Esther?
I just had quickly, Esther, would you have, as you looked over this, would you think, do you have a proposal as the length of time?
Well, I think, I don't know if you could do this, but if a person makes the arrangement within the 14 days to pay off a $300 fine at $50 a month for 6 months, then don't take them to court as long as they pay you the $50 every month. And that would make it more equal to what it would be for someone like me to write a $300 check in the next 2 weeks.
Mayor
That's my
Pressley?
thought.
The legal department does make arrangements with people to spread it out over time.
Well, just the language in the ordinance, as I read it, doesn't say you have to make, if your intent is...
You had to pay the whole thing in a week, but we've always, or whatever it was, we've always allowed people to make arrangements, correct? In the legal department?
Partially correct.
Partially correct? Okay.
Whether the city is willing in a settlement to enter into a payment plan is really something that should be addressed to the finance department, because they're going to have to be the ones to track all these settlement agreements. And I don't know if they have the facilities or desire. However, if a matter goes to court and whether a plea agreement is entered or a finding of guilty, either of which results in some kind of a fine, the legal division, if somebody contacts us indicating they just don't have the ability, the legal division enters into settlement agreements all the time. We have some settlement agreements where people are paying maybe an $800 total. They're paying $10 a month, and they go on for years. So that can happen, but the fine is paid into the court at that point, and the city is not managing the fine.
Well, if I were the person who got the ticket and I were trying to support 2 kids on $16,000 a year, I'd rather the city council vote to make it a law that I can actually read on the books rather than counting on the discretion of either legal or finance department to work something out with me. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all I had for public input. The mayor has a proclamation.
Okay, this is about historic preservation. Whereas historic preservation is an effective tool for managing growth, revitalizing neighborhoods, fostering local pride, and maintaining community character while enhancing livability. And whereas the City of Urbana has a historic preservation plan and currently has locally designated 18 historic landmarks and 3 historic districts, and whereas historic preservation is relevant for communities across the nation, both urban and rural, and for Americans of all ages, all walks of life, and all ethnic backgrounds. And whereas it is important to celebrate the role of history in our lives and the contributions made by dedicated individuals in helping to preserve the tangible aspects of the heritage that has shaped us as a people. And whereas this month the Urbana Historic Preservation Commission is hosting an unprecedented number of educational events in observance of National Historic Preservation Month, now therefore I, Laurel Lunt Pressing, Mayor of the City of Urbana, Illinois, do hereby proclaim May 2016 as National Historic Preservation Month in the City of Urbana, and call upon the people of Urbana to join their fellow citizens across the United States in recognizing and participating in this special observance.
Thank you. We have one presentation tonight from Daryl Cruz, the historical perspective of TIF 1 and TIF 2. Daryl?
First of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity to address you as part of a presentation this evening. I'm certainly aware of the constraints of time and the agenda that you have. I also think this is an important topic that is nearing a critical time when the city gets its proposal for a new central downtown TIF and to provide an opportunity for the city council and the board community to look at this issue a little more closely. I want to start by referring to a quote in the paper that Tom Kasich wrote last week, when Brandon Boyes was at the MTD board and making a presentation about the downtown TIF, and Tom wrote in the paper this particular sentence. And this is a quote from Randon. "The development is dependent upon approving of a new tax increment financing district that would include the project site, a project design, a development agreement between Urbana and TWG," Boyes said. The concern or problem I have with that statement is that it seems awfully premature because it's inferring that the TIF district study will make the downtown eligible without the city council having had a chance to see it. That basically city staff and the city council have determined there are no other alternatives to economic development. And lastly, I think it gives the implication that a little bit of a scare tactic in a sense, because it's saying that it's dependent upon rather than a possibility to beforehand. And everybody in this room and community supports economic development, and I certainly am hopeful and supportive of the TWG project. But to suggest before the report has come out and make a public statement that it's dependent upon, I think is a little troublesome. So tonight I want to change a little bit of the focus and not so much focus on the historical performance, although I want to highlight a couple of items for you because you've got a lot of that information that I gave you. But I would like to suggest to you that there are some alternatives that you might want to look at and consider as part of how you can promote economic development in downtown Urbana. And why alternatives must be considered. And I'm speaking specifically to the downtown TIF. The tax increment financing is proven to be less than a stellar economic development tool when applied to downtown, when we look at it historically. It's been there for 35 years. We'll touch upon a couple of things real quickly. TIF may not even be the proper, the best economic tool choice available to the city or the community as a whole if we aren't willing to look outside of TIF at this point in time. Fourthly, the two downtown TIFs have severely constrained local taxing bodies' access to and ability to recover their diverted property tax dollars, which we'll look at very quickly. And lastly, and probably most troubling when I talk to other boards and other people, TIFs are simply too long in their effect compared to other economic tools. So I would like to move on. Whoops, I suppose we can go back here if we hit the right arrow. Okay, so as you look at your decision about a TIF, I think there are a number of factors that you need to look at, I would hope you would look at to inform your decision. I would hope you would look at the historical performance of TIF in 1, because now we have that. The second factor is I hope you would look at the financial impact on local taxing bodies. I would hope you would look at the current research on TIF effectiveness in Illinois. I would hope you would look at the effect of and unintended consequences of manipulating free market forces that would occur naturally if taxpayer subsidies were not there. And finally, the financial trade-off of using taxpayers' money to subsidize economic development rather than for a myriad of programs and services that also improve the quality of life of many citizens. And that's when we go back to the other 8 taxing bodies and what they provide for the community. Very quickly, I would just like to look at a quick glance of TIF 1's and 2 performances just to highlight a couple of things. I'm not going to go into a lot of details, but I think the public needs to be aware that the city has already collected almost $34.5 million in TIF 1 and 2 dollars since they started, and that's on page 4 in the report that I gave you. The last 6 years, 70% of the TIF dollars were spent on non-direct economic development expenditures and 30% on subsidies to businesses. That's on page 7, which you can look at. So there's the question of economic development versus other activities for TIF. I think everybody would agree that the city's downtown infrastructure has been greatly enhanced and improved. I don't think there's any question about the streets, the bridges, the walkways, the benefit that has occurred with infrastructure improvements. Number 4, but the new business growth has been meager. Clearly there's been some successes, but clearly there's been some failures. It's been kind of a trade-off over the history with regards to downtown, and part of that explanation the city staff has already provided. The EAV growth resulting from new downtown business development has been disappointing, and that's on page 5, which you can look at and you've seen. Because the EAV development has been disappointing, this is the question that's fundamental as to how TIF affects other taxing bodies. It will take decades for other taxing bodies to recapture their property tax dollars. And you can look at that on pages 4, 9, and 11. And lastly, TIF was originally, and the city has promoted TIF as an economic development tool, but it's used thousands of TIF dollars that are no longer used directly to address blight, but for a variety of other city purposes. Some of them marginal. People would say you spend it on art, festivals, salaries, public building renovations, marketing, and so on. Very quickly, just to look at the cost of TIF 1 and 2 local taxing bodies, the chart here basically breaks it out, and you can see of the $34.5 million, a little over $18 million of that came from the school district. About $5 million of that was your money, which I think is an important thing I want to come back to in a little bit. And you can go through the rest of that and see the dollar amounts roughly. They aren't meant to be exact, but I think they're accurate enough that they give you a picture of where the property tax dollars come from. And the 4 columns on the right simply give you an idea, based upon EAV growth, how long will it take these taxing bodies to recapture their lost property tax dollars? If you don't include Consumer Price Index, you can do it roughly between 12 and 24 years, depending who you are. But if you adjust for inflation and take that into account, it literally will take anywhere from 50 to 90 years for people to recapture the lost value of their property taxes. If you look at that, there's only one entity there that did not lose a dollar, that has not risked a cent of its property tax dollars, and that's the city of Urbana, because you've collected them. So I think there's a responsibility to consider the impact on other taxing bodies as you look at this particular economic development tool. So I'd like to move on to 4 possible alternatives to a new downtown TIF. Before I do that, I do want to make a highlight, and I do want to mention the report that nobody responded. The report by Dye and Merriman, who work for the University of Illinois in the Department of, let me make sure I get it right here, Institute of Government and Public Affairs, who have studied TIFs in Illinois. And I'm not going to do anything except read one short paragraph, and that's their conclusion. And for people who are into data and research and what we can learn from that, I think research is one of those factors you have to integrate in. The conclusion, tax increment financing is an alluring tool. TIF districts go much faster than other areas in their host municipalities. TIF boosters or naive analysis might point to this as evidence of the success of tax increment financing, but they would be wrong. Observing high growth in an area targeted for development is unremarkable. The issues we have studied are, 1, whether the targeting area causes the growth or merely signals that growth is coming. 2, whether the growth in a targeted area comes at the expense of other parts of the same municipality. We find evidence that non-TIF areas of municipalities that use TIF grow no more rapidly and perhaps more slowly than similar municipalities that do not use TIF. Policymakers should use TIF with caution. It is, after all, merely a way of financing economic development and does not change the opportunities for development or the skills of those doing the developmental planning. And there's an extensive statistical basis for that conclusion if you go back and look at it. So what are some 4 possible alternatives? I would suggest to you, there may be more, these are just some that I would suggest. You could take a TIF moratorium. You could create your own economic development fund. You could limit TIF to a certain lifespan. It doesn't have to go 23 years. You can set a certain number of years. Or you could possibly combine a limited TIF with a city economic development plan. And I'd like to look at each of those very quickly and briefly. The first one is the moratorium. It's quite possible that with the improved downtown infrastructure, that the economic development might grow quite naturally without the need for taxpayer subsidies. Is it time to let the free market operate uninhibited? That was the original goal of TIF 1, and I would suggest to you that 35 years of TIF 1 may have created the environment you desired at this point in time. And you'll never know unless you possibly give yourself an opportunity to see what those benefits are. Since TIF 2 doesn't terminate until 2022, the city could use the next 5 years to evaluate the viability of promoting economic development without a new TIF. Could be a refreshing approach, both for taxpayers and to provide a level playing field for all the developers that are trying to create business in the community. In 2021, if the results are not satisfactory, the city can always reinstate. You're never precluded from not creating it. It's just the continuity of 70 years in a row that I think is a concern to some people. The second proposal is a city-funded economic development plan. I'm not going to go. I think I emailed each of you a 3-page copy of how that might work. What this suggests is that since the city collects its own property tax dollars in TIF districts, it already has committed to economic development. So if the city would simply continue to use its own last year's increment dollars that it gets from the TIFs as they terminate and continue to fund economic development, how much money would the city have, or what would that look like? Okay, over the course of 20 years, you can look at the paper, it suggests that the city would have over $13 million just using its own money. Secondly, and I'm going to address some what I see as some of the advantages of this. Secondly, it places the responsibility for economic development where it legally and logically belongs, the city, not schools, parks, or health districts. It restores the intent and stability of the local property tax system. It no longer diverts vital property taxes needed by local taxing districts by providing them with immediate and long-term financial benefits. Can you imagine if city-funded economic development was occurring, how the local community as a whole could benefit by collecting their property tax increases immediately, and the impact that might have on schools, public health, public transportation, instead of them having to wait 23 years or 35 years to get it? It eliminates the high risk of taxing bodies losing property tax dollars if adequate EAV growth doesn't occur. And that is the performance history of downtown TIFs in Urbana. It eliminates the need for the entire bureaucracy of TIF administration, bookkeeping, regulatory rules, and annual financing. The fund could be extremely focused targets only subsidizing downtown economic development, which I think the public would support. It provides flexibility to the city. It is definitely much more understandable to the public than what TIF is. And most people cannot understand how TIF works. I think it would improve city accountability. The public can see clearly what the city is doing with their tax dollars. It eliminates future questionable and marginal TIF allocations that do not increase EAV or match the original intention of TIF. And 12th, it eliminates the unfairness, the inequities, and the discretionary nature of how some taxing bodies gain access to their TIF dollars and others do not. And that's been an inherent problem. A third proposal is you could limit the life of a TIF to 8 years. TIFs don't have to exist forever. And I suggested 8 years simply to use the soccer planet as an example. If you had a TIF project, oh, we need to support this. Well, let's support this, but in 8 years and our $300,000 subsidy to that particular project, when we reach that, let's shut it down and then let the business prosper and let all the taxing bodies benefit instead of waiting another 15, or if it's extended, like they have been, another 12 years beyond that, 35 years. Champaign used this approach with the Kraft TIF in the warehouse. They limited it. There's only one project. That TIF was designed by Kraft, sold to the city council, was put in place. It has a number of limited years. When Kraft gets its subsidies back, that TIF is over. It doesn't go on forever.
Daryl, you're at like 15 minutes now. Could you?
Okay, there's just one more, then I'm done. And you could use this approach with TWG, and I think I mentioned the lifespans would be very advantageous to the taxpayer, the community, and so on. The TW project I listed there, if the TIF exists and TWG becomes a TIF project, here's the property tax dollars the city would get as soon as that's done, over $1 million a year. The school district would be losing $586,000 a year, or over the next 20 years, if it was completed in 2019 or 2020, $12 million. Okay? I would simply suggest that the city could use its property tax dollars and self-fund this and not do it at the expense of the other property tax bodies in the community. That's a heavy cost for a lot of people. The last proposal is simply a combination between those last two, a limited TIF and a city-funded development fund. And so in closing, I would simply ask you to consider, to explore these other options as you explore a TIF. Why would you not want to get the information and the pros and cons of alternatives to TIF, along with the TIF proposal that you had TWG provide you to begin with? I think the community would appreciate it. I think if the taxing bodies had the opportunity to express their opinions regarding other options, you might get more insightful input from the taxing bodies in terms of their position regarding TIF, and maybe, hey, you know, let's have a limited TIF. Let's do, the city do an economic development fund. I'm sure they would be interested in discussing some of those options. And lastly, most importantly, I think it would be more helpful for the entire community as a whole to be able to know that every option was explored as to how best to promote economic development in the way that least negatively affects the community and accomplishes the goal without affecting our local taxing bodies. So I share this presentation and hope you will take some of those alternatives and explore them as we move forward in this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Daryl. Are there any questions? Aaron?
So first of all, Daryl, I want to really thank you for doing this type of in-depth work. I think this is a prime example of what democracy is supposed to look like, that citizens are supposed to take very active, play very active roles in their government. And so I don't understand TIF the way that I would like to understand TIF. I've had several conversations with Brandon, other city council members, other people in the community, and I do get a mixed bag of responses. Many people say that this is something that is just a new way to give money to developers, that the blight and stuff like that was the initial proposal to address, but then all of a sudden it turns into other different ideas, and it's used for other different things. And then I talk to some people who try to explain it to me and say, hey, this is a good thing. So I'm sort of, but I still don't have the understanding that I would like to have as to what TIF is, what it actually creates. So for you to take this amount of time, and I watched you at the school board have the conversation there, to take issues on the way that you take them on, I actually really appreciate that. Not because we've worked together for years, but I just think that there's a lot of work that goes into this, and I appreciate you putting forth that effort. I have some questions. You showed a slide of the school board being the one taxing body that loses money. Why is it that only the school board loses money in this layout that you've given us here?
I'm not sure which one you're putting.
So I'm looking at, it says the TWG diverted local property tax dollars.
No, those are property tax. Each of the taxing bodies, the Park District's total annually is about $120,000 a year, and the Champaign County loses 86, and on the right-hand column is what the total would be for the remaining 20 years.
So all of these bodies, you're
Yes.
saying they lose?
Well,
They're-
no, what they're doing is they aren't losing anything. See, that's a word I don't think that we want to use, because I'm not saying they're losing it necessarily.
Okay.
What it is that increment increase, once a baseline is set, instead of them getting that tax property growth increase, it goes into the TIF district. The point in time and the theoretical promise that was made when TIF was adopted by the state legislature in 1977, at the conclusion or termination of TIF in 23 years, which was changed to extend to 35 years if city councils did it, that these taxing bodies then could recover very quickly the diverted property tax dollars, and everybody would have a win-win. When the EAV growth, if you look at the performance history, if you look at the makeup of downtown Urbana, is it really the most suitable place for TIF as an economic development tool, or are there alternatives that are better? I would suggest to you, look at the data, look at the history, look at the facts, look at the study, look at how long it's taking these bodies to get their money back from a downtown TIF. They don't. Now, there's some variations, okay, because there's special agreements with some TIF participants. There are some monies that are given back, certain amounts, but the bulk of the money is still there for that. And so that's just the historical perspective of TIF performance, and I would suggest that it would behoove the community and the city council to at least look at alternatives to TIF, which has not really shown itself to be a very effective economic development tool in downtown.
So my understanding is that you said the EAV, which is the estimated assessed value.
Equalized assessed valuation.
Equalized assessed value, that the projects that are created from TIF are supposed to make the businesses or the area, the value go up on those properties and the businesses, and then those taxing bodies get more from all of those places
When TIF terminates.
when the TIF
Yeah,
terminates.
so TWG, if it goes through, and I hope it does, but if it goes through under a TIF district, once that project is built, the city will be collecting all that increment for the next 20 years, which is, how much was it? Well, we can see what the breakdown, it's $1 million a year, so it's over $20 million. You can use your own EAV growth on this project to subsidize it if you'd want to, and have the benefit spread out to the whole community. If they could also, imagine if the school district in 2021 could collect $600,000 more instead of waiting 25 years or 23 years, or any of these taxing bodies. If you could pull that off and use it, you would be the pride and joy of not just economic development, but every taxing body in Champaign-Urbana, because you've benefited all of them, not just yourself. They have a delayed gratification benefit of 35 years, these taxing bodies. That's the inherent problem with TIF. And if the EAV growth doesn't occur, they have no benefit financially.
Dennis?
Is it not true, and maybe this is for Elizabeth Hanna, I wonder, Is it not true that every year we reimburse a certain amount of money, funds, back to the taxing bodies that is called surplus reimbursement? Yes, okay, that would be fine. Libby, Libby, you can also answer this.
We do pay surplus from TIF 1, but this fall will be the last time that we do that because TIF 1 actually ends December 31st, 2016.
But in the past, every year, there has
Yes.
been a redisbursement of unused funds back to the taxing bodies.
Yes,
Isn't that correct?
every year the council has declared a surplus, and we've distributed those funds back to the
And that's
taxing
been pretty
bodies.
regular for the last multiple years that I've been on council.
There hasn't
Yeah.
been any in TIF 2.
I don't recall the total amount without that information in
So
front
it's
of me.
not completely true that there hasn't been a return of investment to the taxing bodies.
Okay. Look, can I answer that real quick? TIF 4 and TIF 3, there's been larger amounts of surplus sent back. In TIF 2, I don't think it's happened once. In TIF 1, I've looked at every annual report, and I've asked, in TIF 1, there has been some surplus that has gone back, but it's,
I'm just saying this,
Yeah.
Darrell, because you said that there was none.
no, I'm saying that this is what's collected. There's been projects. Yes, there's been some surpluses, and there's been money that has gone to special projects to the school district or park district. But the size of those surpluses, like the school district got about $2.6 billion back in TIF 1 and 2 over the 23 years, but they contributed $18 million. Okay, it's true there are
Did you
some
say
of that.
2.6 billion or million?
Million. No, the school district did get sizable project money. There are some surpluses, but they're really pennies on the dollar compared to what they've contributed over time.
Okay, well, thank you for at least commenting on it that way,
Yeah.
because you painted a very broad brush.
Okay, clarify. That's appreciate it.
Okay, and then also, is it not true then, Elizabeth Anna, that the participating taxing bodies willingly agree to participate in the TIF programs?
I'm going to give that one to the other Elizabeth.
Okay, thank you.
Libby Tyler, Community Development
That
Director.
we actually have agreements with taxing bodies to that they agree to have a certain amount of the growth of the base funds withheld for the purpose of economic development.
The other taxing bodies are our partners in all the TIFs, and the TIFs are all very different. They have different goals.
Yes.
It's not necessarily always about increased increment, especially in a built-up area in a downtown. It's about achieving redevelopment goals for the whole community. And among our missions at the city is economic development. And I think one of the school board members mentioned this as well, that's something that's community-wide. But it's not something that individually the park district or the school district or the county board or MTD would be able to pursue. So it's left to the city, and unlike some communities, we work very closely with the other taxing districts for all these redevelopment projects and TIFs to make sure that these are things that will be good for the community as a whole. And that might mean including some park land, perhaps in a TIF, or including benefits to schools in the parks in the neighborhood in TIF 3, for example. So each TIF is a little different. The one we're looking at now has the potential for improvements to Crystal Lake Park, which is our downtown park, and Lille Park as well, as including school district properties. And we do have a comprehensive evaluation. I know the council's been asking for this for a while, and looking at our downtown TIFs and just, what's been accomplished, what have we achieved. And so we're getting closer on that. It's been taking some time, but we do have that scheduled for you.
And I've got just one last question. When we use TIF dollars to enhance a project that has the construction is the basic purpose of it, construction of a building or renovation of a building. And I'll take the Landmark Hotel, which received TIF money. The amounts that are given to the project are for construction materials which will remain on the city no matter who owns the property, and these are reimbursements for monies that are spent by the developer. And that's the enhancement, is that the city is willing to reimburse the developer for funds that the developer uses to build and construct real property in the community that will last as a permanent enhancement to the downtown, whether it be a business structure or residential structure in the community. And so we're not just giving a blank check to a development company with TIF funds, because we expect to receive receipts to show that reimbursement is appropriate. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, and the development agreements, we do spell that out, but that was a very good summary of our development agreements.
Okay. So these are the things that I think show that the city does indeed monitor the TIF activities very carefully.
Any
I
other
just have a follow-up with
comments?
Libby.
Sir,
on just-
Aaron?
Okay. So Libby, you said that the staff is still studying the financial impact that the TIF has had on downtown. Is that what I heard you say?
We've been asked to do a retrospective on the downtown TIFs for some time ago. And we've reviewed the reports, and we're compiling kind of the results of that. And and it's a qualitative and a quantitative analysis. It's got a lot of good information there. And I think what we're looking at with the new downtown TIF is de-TIFing the areas where we've achieved our redevelopment goals. And then there is increment that will go back to all the taxing bodies, including the city. So that's successful. But it takes a more surgical approach in the parts of the downtown where we do still see that blight condition that we're talking about, blight/conservation, that the consultant is reviewing, and where we do have undone projects that we want to complete.
So the TIFs that cover downtown have been in existence for how long total?
They, TIF 1 and TIF 2 took advantage of this statute that allowed for the extension to 35 years.
So we've had about 70 years of
No,
TIF?
no, 35 years.
35 years of
Yeah.
TIF
Yeah,
in two different districts,
two contiguous districts that
contiguous
cover a lot of
districts.
the downtown. Yeah.
which still has not addressed the blight in downtown. We don't have a real big downtown, so I'm just saying 35 years in two TIF districts and millions of dollars, and we still don't have the goals accomplished.
We've accomplished a lot of the goals, and that's where we're de-TIFing. And when you think about it, and we'll have a list of the projects, it's really hard to imagine what our downtown would look like without the TIF projects and without the businesses.
So one of the things that I'm getting from the conversation is that specific goals or specific projects for TIF might be necessary for Urbana, right, or a city like Urbana. But development has occurred for many years in many places without TIFs, right? Developers see opportunities. They see whether it's blighted areas or areas where they feel like they can come in and develop and make a profit, and they do it whenever we send out an RFP or something. No?
See, this is my problem with the studies that Durrell references, that they are comparing apples and oranges. They're comparing areas that aren't already built up, what we call greenfield TIFs, where TIFs are used, I believe, improperly to incentivize development that would occur anyway. And yes, you build a lot of increment because there's no improvements on the property. So that's That's the abuse of TIF that the academic studies have looked at. And when you look at an area that is an older downtown, it needs to evolve. And really, the other communities, all of our peer communities, use TIF. It is the economic development tool to use in downtowns to allow them to continue to thrive, to help with the infrastructure and the improvements, and to bring in the development so that we can keep our historic downtowns as vital business centers. So we could take an experiment, do a moratorium, but we would be sitting it out when our neighbors in Champaign and Rantoul and Decatur and, you know, essentially all the other communities are using the tool that the legislature's given us. There, you know, there could be other tools
But we
used.
still have till 2022 for TIF 2. And if we're still actually doing a study to actually determine whether or not it's been beneficial, it does seem to make some sense to me that if we did wait, we did take a look to actually see what the benefit has been for our downtown and our other taxing bodies after 35 years, using the extension and actually studying it, having some actual hard numbers, data, qualitative and quantitative data to look at to see whether or not this has been beneficial for us, that does resonate with me. That does make sense for us to study and find out what the impact has actually been.
Yeah, and that's coming. You'll have that in 2 weeks. So it's actual information, not just one viewpoint. Actual information, and I think it's going to be helpful.
Eric?
So I am looking forward to getting that report, and I did read through the material that you sent, Daryl. The problem that I think there's an inherent problem in assessing the effect of TIF, and that is you're trying to compare a reality with a hypothetical. The reality is you did TIF, or you didn't do TIF. The hypothetical is what would have happened if you hadn't done that. And I don't, you know, I do a lot of, I mean, I'm a scientist. I try to reduce, you know, try to isolate variables. I don't know how to isolate the variables in this situation. I think here we have to really go with the best judgment. But I would concur with Libby that we really can't compare infill TIFs to greenfield TIFs. They're really different things. And whereas greenfield TIFs have a bad name justifiably because they are often just boondoggles to developers with political clout, infill TIFs, I think, are probably essential to keep central cities viable.
Charlie?
What I was going to point out is that we've devolved into discussion, and we should save that discussion for 2 weeks from now. Questions may come up. I have a specific question of Daryl in that, and I want to, and this will also come over to the study that we've been expecting. Are TIF 3 and 4 going to be included in this retrospective?
We're focusing on 1 and 2 for this.
Okay, but
we
TIF
do have information on 3 and 4 as well.
Okay, yeah. So I noticed Daryl has left out TIFs 3 and TIF 3, and which had a much shorter time frame, was done. Projects were done. That to me was a very successful TIF, and it's left out of this study here. You know, some TIFs are more successful than others, and in a way, aren't you cherry picking, Daryl, to not include TIF 3 and the success that we had with TIF 3?
No, I'd be happy to answer that. No, I'm not trying to cherry pick at all. Matter of fact, as we said, TIFs are all different in terms of the way they're designed, the way they're set up, and the purpose and goals of them. And it's interesting because TIF 3, when you got to the point when it was to terminate, you could look and see, hey, this worked. We can see it. We don't need to extend it. And that's great. I suspect TIF 4 will be somewhat the same way when that point in time comes. The question that's really, really unique here is that the new TIF that's being created is the central downtown TIF. So it really doesn't do any good if you don't want to mix apples and oranges is to compare TIF 3 to downtown or TIF 4 or TIFs in other communities.
Yeah, I guess
what you need to do is just look at downtown
My
TIF.
point is that TIF 3 and TIF 4 have been done very carefully with our partners in mind. And, you know, the same with the enterprise zone that's been done as well. That's, you know, just getting started, and there it's hand in hand, you know, basically, and I'm going to go ahead and make my comment here. You know, the city shouldn't be the only entity at risk for economic development that's going to benefit everybody. In some communities, the park district is part of the city. Some cities, even the school district is part of the city. So when the city does economic development, the park district and the city and the school district are automatically included. They're, you know, they are partners. They're equally at risk and benefit. You know, if we're putting in our money, then shouldn't we get all the benefit of that down the road? You're saying, oh, we should put in all our money and share the benefit with everybody else. So that's my conclusion. I don't have any other questions. I think it's much more important that we look at a much more in-depth study. We also look at how we've succeeded with TIF 3 and TIF 4 so that we include those components, that success, in the new central TIF.
Okay, thank you. Diane.
I'll be brief. The one thing that's catching my ear is the length of the TIFs, and so I would like, as we go forward in looking at the creation of the new TIF 1, to have some options as far as the length of the TIF. And it seems like you could have a shorter TIF if you had several big projects starting at once. So if we have the TWG and we have the Timponis or the Jolly Roger site, and you know, if there's several big projects that seem to be getting underway at the same time in the downtown area, then it would be logical to consider a shorter, more surgical time frame for the TIF. So that's just one thing I'd like to see options on.
If I can respond to that.
Okay.
Which is why I think it's important that we look at how TIF 3 worked, because that was shorter and with projects in mind and exactly that. And so, you know, why was that? You know, where was that success and how was it driven and so forth. So I think it's important to include that in our analysis.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
So,
Aaron.
Daryl, I think when you looked at alternatives or possible alternatives, you have a TIF moratorium, creating a city economic development fund, limiting a new TIF's life to, you said, 8 years. Do you recall the life of the term of TIF 3 or TIF 4?
Yeah, they're 23 years.
They were each
I don't think
23
either
years.
one were extended. They were just 23 years.
Okay.
Right.
And when you say creating a city economic development fund, I saw you put up a figure of $13 million that would be set aside, but that's over 20 years?
Yeah, that's just the way it would work. It's very similar to the way TIF operates now. It's just taking the increment that the city would collect and reinvesting it in economic development, and it would grow over time. It's the exact dollars that you've used in the 4 TIFs in the city.
And then the projects that you're saying that you are supportive of projects that use TIF for specific projects, like a TWG, or not? I'm trying to make sure I'm clear on that.
I'm not here to say yet that one way is better than the other. I'm interested in seeing the proposal and how they make it eligible and what the goals are. But I do know that it would be unfortunate for the city council to preclude. There's only one economic tool or one path forward, and that's a 23-year downtown TIF. That is not true. That is totally misleading to the public. There are other options available. In fact, they may be better for the community as a whole. And if you don't explore those options completely, then I feel you've done a disservice. You can decide what you want to do once you consider it. I'm not saying I have all of the options, but to sit here and just assume that, like Brandon in the article, that this project is dependent upon a downtown TIF is very misleading and unfortunate, because we haven't done anything else yet. It's like this trade is on the track and it's set, and the community has no choice or no discussion or no debate. The pros and cons are to look at the history, and that needs to be done, because this is a 23-year, over $20 million impact on other taxing bodies when you make that decision.
Thank
I had
you.
a question for Libby.
Okay, it's
thanks,
getting a
Darrell.
little bit repetitive here, so if you can bring up something new, that'd
Well,
be fine.
we repeat a lot of stuff at this particular council, and so I think this is a very important discussion. Libby, the project, there's a gentleman who just came last week to speak to a project on University Avenue, right next to the new apartment complex. The old Mexican restaurant is going to be torn down, something like that. Is that gentleman receiving TIF dollars? No. So my point, and I think what Darrell is pointing out, is that sometimes the market does what it's supposed to do. This gentleman obviously saw that there are students who are going to be right there. There's going to be new people and an opportunity to make money. And so they saw a good place to put a business. And so I think that the development that we've done, there's another point that Darrell makes that has legs. If you have put in 35 years with 2 TIF districts in downtown and done a tremendous amount of work downtown, why don't we allow this sort of free market to say, hey, listen, there's some opportunities down here. There's some development that's taking place here. Why don't we, let's see how that works. I mean, I see it in other places. Other development takes place. It doesn't have to have a TIF. So I'm just saying, I thought that point was another point that needs to be explored. And if there are options that we can use, then I think that's relevant. I watched some of the Urbana school board stuff. I've talked to school board members. I've talked to Park District members. Most of the people don't understand TIF. So to say that we have our partners are like all on board and they are like, yes, we should do this, I think that's a little misleading, because I've had conversations with members who do not understand TIF. So for them to be voting to support it, I think they may not understand it completely. So I'm just saying. Yeah.
Just real quick.
Libby?
I do wish the market was so strong that we could just, back off and the market would take care of it. And I think with time that will begin to happen. However, the last substantial new construction we've had in the downtown was a Stratford. And that is 10 or 12 years. It's been a while. We would like to see more. Clearing the land north and marketing it has taken a long time. Without a powerful tool like TIF, we will not have a building there. I mean, we've done everything. We've set the table. We have the tools in place. We've marketed. And with all that hard work, we're poised to get a significant project that will help to build the tax base and add more residents to support the businesses. When we begin to see these projects, now we've done well with renovations. We've done well with those and with new businesses in the downtown. New construction, there's more work that needs to be done. So again, we are de-TIFing early portions of TIF 2 for our partners and ourselves, and focusing on the portions of the downtown that still need the assistance. So we have a goal. We're not there yet. We've accomplished wonderful things, but we're not there yet. And that's my personal opinion on the state of downtown redevelopment.
Anyone else? Okay. Thank you very much, Darrell.
Thank you for your time.
Staff report, Bill Gray for Capital Improvement Plan, or Public Works.
Okay. Good evening. I'm Craig Schunkweiler, Assistant City Engineer. I manage the street system within Urbana. On the 23rd of this month, Brad Bennett, the other assistant city engineer, and Bill Gray will be presenting more detail on the capital improvement plan. I will be out of the state at that time, so this is kind of an advanced preview, based mainly dealing with just the street component of the CIP. Tonight we'll go over the state of the system, what we've done lately, what's on the plate this year, the capital improvement plan itself, where we're headed in the future, and then the unfunded projects that are out there. As far as the pavement system status, within the city of Urbana, we have 3 types of streets. We have arterials, which an example would be those type there, listed there, Lincoln, Maine, Florida, Windsor. We have collector type streets, which are Goodwin, Washington, Race, Mumford, McHenry. That's just an example. And we have local streets, which are just really neighborhood streets. Those are the 3 types of streets for the functional classification system. In Urbana, our arterials make up about 20% of our total street system. The collectors are about 32%, and then the locals about 48%. On the right of the screen there, you can see the lane miles. Lane miles are basically, that's a standard that we use in the industry. 1 mile is, 1 lane mile is 12 foot wide. So an example would be if we had a road like Lincoln Avenue that was 1 mile long with 4 lanes of traffic, that would be 4 miles. Pavement type, we basically are about 50-50 concrete, asphalt. You can see we have just slightly a little bit more, I guess, asphalt than concrete. Our brick streets are down to about 6.6 lane miles, and our intent is to preserve those streets that we do have left. The other type streets are seal coat streets, meaning that they're kind of a weaker type street that do not have an asphalt or concrete base to them. This slide here, I realize it's difficult to read, but this is basically the street rating guidelines that I've developed in how I rate streets. It's basically like a heat map. So if you look at the bottom and the red, those are failed, all the way up to blue is excellent. So when I go out and rate the streets, and I'll switch to the next sheet here, I rate all of the streets. It took me 4 years to drive through the city to rate all the streets. This may be the first time in the history of Urbana that we've actually got collectively the whole system rated. What you see here with the heat map is that you know, we're not in too bad a shape, but we have a large bubble of fair streets at 35%. We don't, at this very moment, have what we would call very poor or failed street. A failed street would be an undrivable street. A very poor, we're teetering on some. We're at the 2% poor. They keep sliding down. But it took 4 years to rate it, and this is basically the status of the system to date.
Some of those excellents might be moved down.
Yeah, with time, they begin to move down. So an excellent would go to very good, and then, you know, on to a good, and then fair, and then poor, unless you do pavement management techniques to reset the curve. Or you wait until it's completely failed, and then you reconstruct it and reset it to excellent. The most cost-effective way to manage a system is to reset it before it gets to failed. In this upcoming year, we're asking to have some funding using the capital replacement and improvement funds to develop a pavement management system. Currently, the system is a spreadsheet-based system. We'd like to move to something more like a GIS-based system. We'd also like to bring a partner with a consultant via an RFP to help us set something up, and then do like a $50,000 annual commitment to managing the system. Staff would manage it, but basically we would use the experts from consultants to help us set the system up. A pavement management system would allow us to would tell us the best use of our taxpayer dollars. Currently, right now, it's a spreadsheet system, so I do it as a ranking, but that's not necessarily the most efficient way to manage a system. I cannot do at this point any kind of forecasting to the future. I can't tell you how many dollars that we need in the system to move that 35% that's fair up. So a payment management system would allow us to be able to do forecasting, and that is currently, there will be an ask here in a couple weeks for that $100,000 for the payment management system to get that set up this year. Recently completed projects. We redid the Broadway Avenue project up there by Crystal Lake Park. This was a prime example of a project where we partnered with the Park District to do the multi-use path on the west side of the road. I can tell you without partnering with them, we would have just repaired some of the ramps and we would not have probably built the multi-use path due to lack of funds. So the park, we did the in-house design and the construction observation, our staff did, and then the Park District reimbursed us for the construction cost of that path, which I urge all of you to take a walk up through there. It's definitely one of those areas where I feel the quality of life is improved. Before, when you would walk up that way, you may not see very many people walking. Most of the time that I go through, I see people walking their dogs or just out, you know, taking a walk, and I think that's definitely a sign of a successful project.
And I just want to say that Carol and I did have a little bike race down through there. She was still on the old pavement by the time I got finished with the new pavement, but that's another conversation. No, it was really nice. It was a nice, pleasant ride, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the connection to go all the way through. And even the geese stuff droppings weren't as bad.
Right, not on the north end. Right.
Yeah, right.
Another project that was finished this last year was the High Cross Road improvements. A key component of that was Washington Avenue, which run from Pfeffer to High Cross. As I mentioned to others, that was a really a prime example of between the mayor and Bill Gray getting this jobs money now, so there was not a dollar of city funds used in that section of Washington, and I can tell you it was in pretty bad shape. We also did some concrete patching last year on the Bradley Avenue section west of Lincoln. We also went up to Goodwin, west city limits to, it should have been actually Beslin, I'm sorry, west city limits to Goodwin. And we also did Goodwin from Eads to Bradley. That's all in advance of bike lane striping on Bradley that we expect to occur here this summer. So the current projects that we have going on is Olympian Drive. The photo here on the top left is actually taken last week. They were laying the asphalt shoulders last week. This project is tied to the Lincoln Avenue project, which is on the nope, not on the next side. And right now, Olympian runs out to basically an existing township road. The township commissioners asked that south from Olympian down to Saline Court be redone before the Olympian's fully open. And it's mainly because of traffic is not, or those roads aren't built to withstand the traffic loading. But it's expected to be open next year. Of course, we had the Windsor Road improvements. Won't be really getting into much detail with this, but I wanted to point out a few of the positive things. There was $5 million allocated to this project. To date, we're sitting at about $4.7 million. And that would be if we had set these pavement issues aside, you could say the project's a success from the standpoint of budgeting, and it came in, the bids came in low. We did have some cost overruns with some subgrade. But overall, the project came in below the budget.
Can I ask you a quick question on this? So when I look at the pavement and the concrete on Windsor Road, and you did the same for Broadway, right? What's the difference?
That's a good question. And and I'll be honest with you, you know, what's going on Windsor is an anomaly. And there are a lot of very smart people involved to try to figure that out. And I unfortunately do not have that answer. If I had that answer, it would be good to, I mean, and I'm not trying to be evasive here. I just don't know why. Okay.
Okay.
With Windsor, a couple things I did want to point out, though, at Vine at Meadowbrook, at the top right picture, we do have the pedestrian warning system in place. And that when the pedestrian pushes the button, the light system flashes there to, you know, give vehicles a warning there. On the bottom middle picture, that's the Windsor and Race intersection. Now there is countdown timers, which help pedestrians to cross that intersection. That's the left picture there. So there are some positive things that have come out of Windsor. Lincoln Avenue, this was the project that I referenced from Olympian Drive. Currently, there's been a little bit of a delay with that, but they're anticipating some utility work here this fall, and then do most of the construction work next spring, summer. We have the Urbana Master Plan, Bike Master Plan update that has been ongoing. One thing I wanted to point out is, you know, our goal as far as staff is to finish that this year. We've had a few comments that we're trying to address. Staff has taken over the plan as far as finishing it out until we get it back on track, and then the Regional Plan Commission will finish it out. Of note there, originally it was $38,000 for the plan. Last year we added about $5,000. This year we've got to add about $5,000 to make RPC whole, but the bulk of the rework on the plan right now is being done by city staff or in-house staff. The bicycle system funding, I wanted to point that out. We have $55,000 annually from the what's called A09, or the Capital Replacement and Improvement Fund, annually set aside. The bottom right picture there is the wayfinding. That's a system that we want to start this year. We've actually accrued some money to start that system here this year. Of the $55,000, though, I will tell you that 30 to 35 is used for restriping bike lanes on an annual basis. Airport Road up by Frasca, that project is ongoing. We're about done with the design. There's been a slight delay with just acquiring some right-of-way and working out some agreements with Frasca there. There is TIF 4 money in this project. This year we will be asking for the third installment of that TIF money. We're looking at about a little bit less than $1 million to finish the funding for that. We also have a matching economic development program funding from the Department of Transportation for that project. So our hope is to get it started this year and finish it next year. We also are looking at some concrete street patching. We want to patch Florida, basically from Philo over to James Cherry down near Thomas Paine, and also Ray Street south of Florida down to Meadow. There's a one-block section there. This is actually anticipated to go out to bid later on this week, and we want to do that construction when the children are out of school at Thomas Paine. Of course, we have the MCOR project, and the 5 projects there are now estimated total at $41.5 million. The Phase 1 study, which basically is the clearance for all the geometrics, all the environmental clearances, things like that. Our contribution was about $500,000 of state motor fuel tax. For the construction portion and design portion of Project 1, which is basically from Wright Street near the Alma Mater down to just east of Lincoln, we have about $2 million in there, and that project is slated to go out to bid here in July.
I just had a quick question for
Sure.
you on the state motor fuel tax contribution. When we do something like that in a project, is it just one lump sum, or is it paid in over? How do we make the payment?
We basically we allocate it in the budget over a period of time, and then we pay, the State Department of Transportation fronts the project, and then they send us bills, and then we pay on periodic installments.
Within one fiscal year, or is it stretched out over?
It's usually, so like say construction starts in July, you know, it may be a year.
Elizabeth is grading you. I just want you to know.
It may be a year before we get our request for reimbursements. And then once they start coming in, then we pay like, you know, on a monthly basis from that point on out. So right now, we've started to accrue monies. You'll see through all of these that we, when we fund projects, we do it on a cash basis, so it's basically an accrual. The one exception is, or accruing money, the one exception is the Windsor Road project where we have a debt payment of $320,000 annually for the next 10 years.
Okay, thank you.
We're looking to resurface Mumford this year, west of Anderson, down to Zupke. This was originally in the 5-year plan. We actually pulled it out of the 5-year plan, and we're using a different funding source to get this project done. We're now limiting the 5-year plan to more of the bigger projects, and this is the type of neighborhood project that we could do with some of the money that we have available. So we're looking at doing that here this year. Also, pavement preservation, we've got about $500,000 set aside for that this year. So we're looking right now at developing plans for a neighborhood asphalt patch, seal coating, and sidewalk ramp program. The regulations have changed, which are requiring us to fix the sidewalks when we do things like basically some of these seal coating requirements. It is a unfunded mandate, but it is the right thing to do. It just means that we can do less of what we do. So we're looking at the Dr. Ellis subdivision this year with those streets, Carver, Romine, Matthews, Beardsley, Eureka, Tremont, and Ellis. We may start them this year and then finish them up next year. We're also looking at a neighborhood seal coating program down at University Downs and Ennis Ridge subdivision at Burleson, Bedroe, Illini Circle, George Huff, Harding, Schumann Circle. That would be more of a low-cost treatment. Those streets are in fairly good shape, and we want to keep them in good shape by putting some type of sealant on them that's low cost. That's actually part of the pavement management plan. Likewise, we're looking at some collector streets where we're, I guess, you know, a term we could use is keeping them together, basically band-aiding them. It's not the ideal thing that we would want to do, but due to limited funding, we can do some patching of the road, seal it up, keep the water out, and these are the streets that we're looking at here: Broadway, a section of Goodwin, East Main, Washington, and there could be other streets if we can fit them into the allotted money that we have. So let's talk about the capital improvement plan. This document, background for it was it's a planning document for infrastructure. It was started in the 1980s. The first CIP was adopted in 1988. There was an adopting ordinance at that time, and it covers a 5-year planning period up through basically fiscal year 21. The budget's covered in the plan. There is some sanitary sewer, stormwater utility funds. Those in yellow are what we're going to talk about tonight, which is the state motor fuel tax, local motor fuel tax, and then portions of the capital replacement and improvement fund. There are also within their TIF funds. Currently, though, of those 4 districts, District 4 is the only one that has infrastructure funding proposed in it. There's also CDBG funds. There is not any current projects for that, nor likewise the motor vehicle parking system funds, although we do have some money allotted for parking lot pavement preservation, but nothing, no reconstruction or resurfacing of parking lots at this time. The state motor fuel tax fund, obviously funded by the state and special allotments. We mainly use those funds to do the major roads. We resurface, reconstruct those streets. We do traffic signals. We also reconstruct bridges. The local motor fuel tax fund, that's currently at 5 cents a gallon, And we do that also for resurfacing and reconstruction projects and pavement preservation and patching projects. And it also pays debt service on Windsor Road. Capital Replacement and Improvement Fund, it's funded by the general fund. We fund bike infrastructure and sidewalk work. We do pavement preservation and patching, street lighting projects, and then there is some home transfer and capital improvement supplementary program funds out of that. Of course, the challenge is we have an aging infrastructure system. We also have declining motor fuel taxes, rising construction costs, of course, increased regulations such as what we talked about earlier. And we're also fiscally constrained, so when we show a budget, we're showing what we can afford. We don't put in the cash flow projects that are not funded. So we had done that at one point in the past, but we don't see a purpose for doing that. We actually want to show you what we can do, and if we can't do it, and you'll see a large list after we get on, that's on the unfunded list. So this is in summary all the money that goes to streets. So, and this is a typical representative of an annual allotment. Okay, so it doesn't include on the state motor fuel tax. Sometimes we get a high growth allotment. There's about $26,000 annually for that because Urbana is a high growth community in the state of Illinois. We'll get a special allotment for that. In the past, there's been an Illinois Jobs Now money that's come through the state. That's not a part of this, a little over $1 million. The local motor fuel tax, since we raised the rate as a city in August, now we're at about $900,000. Of that $900,000, $320,000 goes to the debt service for Windsor Road. We've now made, I believe, 2 payments, and we have 8 more to go. And then the Capital Replacement and Improvement Fund, the money allotted to the roads is about $225,000 annually. So that gives us about $2.2 million to work with. I want to highlight that number because I think that's important to understand what we have to work with when you start seeing projects that I'm going to show you and their cost. So one project that is scheduled for next year with your approval in the upcoming budget, and we've already been accruing some monies in years past, is resurfacing Lincoln Avenue from south of Killarney up to the current north end. That pavement is showing distress. There's a lot of trucks. It's probably our heaviest truck route in the city. We've taken some counts. We're looking at somewhere between 20 and 30% of the traffic is truck traffic. This street needs to be resurfaced in advance of the North Lincoln extension that will be coming up because we'll get more traffic coming down through here. And Lincoln is such a vital street that this is a street that we don't want to let it go too far, or if we let it go too far, then we have to spend a significantly more amount of money to reconstruct it. Next year, too, we're looking at using our local motor fuel tax funds to resurface Vine Street near the viaduct. That is a street that is showing its age. We've allocated some funds there. We do have to do somewhat of a pavement study there because it looks like it's got severe distress. Our public works crews have been doing some patching, spray patching. It's got a rough ride, and we need to get that one reset to provide basically a better entry into Urbana. The year after, in 2018, we're looking at Lincoln Avenue resurfacing from Green, so that would be when the MCOR project is done, up to University Avenue. That's a little less than $1 million. In there also would be the improvements to the Main and University intersection. We will have to do some public studies for that. That picture on the top right, I was out there last week, and that's what you see. You see a bicyclist trying to cross that street. It's kind of dangerous. We need to study that intersection. It's been identified as a problem intersection in the bicycle master plan. And there are possible options in the near future to possibly close all left turns, make a refuge island for bicyclists. But when we do these projects, that's the time to fix these intersections. Of note, too, at the corners there are currently barrier curbs with no ramps. So we have a major street that has a sidewalk system that is pretty much not functional for the disabled or the elderly. Coupled with that and adjacent to it is Springfield Avenue from Gregory to Kohler, so that's about $250,000. So while we're doing one street adjacent to it, we want to couple that with another street so we get more bang for the buck. We're also looking at Vine Street from south of Washington to California. That street is showing distress. It has signs of some concrete issues there that we need to get sealed up before it begins to degrade to the point that it has to be reconstructed. So we need to basically seal the top up and lay asphalt over it, and so we can minimize the reconstruction of that in the near future. Also, MCOR Project 5 is scheduled in 2019. Those are our allotments with that. The SWUF is some stormwater utility funds that are set aside for this project. Also, Fairlawn Drive from Vine to Anderson, it's showing severe distress. Right now, the Public Works crews are going to keep Band-Aiding it until we can get it scheduled in 2019 for what I would call a major rehab. That means that sections of it will get rebuilt, sections of it will get overlaid. But we don't want to let it go too far, or we'll have to spend twice that amount of money.
Are these streets that you're showing us now a part of the very poor, or are they a part of that 35%?
They're down in the poor. Like this one would be at a poor rate. If you drive it, it's in some pretty bad shape. Yeah, most of them, actually almost all of them right now, we're still in reactive mode, meaning that we're just trying to keep the system together. Ideally, the way I look at it, if you have a pot of money, you want to have some of it go towards your good streets, some of it go towards your very bad streets, and then a bunch of it in the middle get reset. Right now, we're having to put a lot of our money to keeping the system together, so we're not able to put as much to upgrading the middle bubble. Lincoln Avenue as well, up south of Washer all the way up to south of Killarney, so that would be the complement to the previous one in next year. This one also, I'll talk about a little bit later, there are some crossing issues with pedestrians that we want to look at as well. And if I'm going too fast, slow me down, but I know you all have a long night. Division Avenue, we feel that this is an important project that would continue the concrete pavement that was constructed with the development there south of Kerr. It's a short section. As you can see to the right there, there's a sidewalk that just dead ends, and then farther on down the way near the new development, there's a sidewalk, but there's no sidewalk, and I see school children walking through there quite readily. So initially this was going to be funded, we thought maybe with some other type of funds, but we actually pulled that out, and we're now using the A09 funds for this in the near future. Anderson Street, Colorado to Florida, we need to look at this one really hard. It's showing severe distress, as you see in the picture there, and we're looking at 2021. So keep in mind, when we talk about everything that you've seen so far is projects that are in the 5-year plan. So we currently have funding identified for these projects. We may, though, where we really focus our attention is next year, and then we have what we would call earmarks for the future. But as we go along with staff, we end up getting into more of the detail analysis and determine if there's ways to save money or to do something different. That's what so these dollar amounts, 425, for instance, maybe there's a different way that we can rehab the road and save some money. We'll always are investigating that option. The last project that is currently funded is Springfield Avenue from Kohler to McCullough. I think one thing to note in the middle of the picture on the right there is that was a mill and overlay that we did 2 years ago, where we just basically had the contractor go through, take the top off and put the top back down. You can see the distress that's already happened. The pavement is broke up. So I get that question a lot. How come we just can't go and recoat the road? Well, there's usually a base issue. So that's what you're seeing there is it's already broke down. We're going to have to hold it together.
So Florida Avenue isn't in the plan here?
I'll show you Florida as we go through here, but no, it is not currently in the five-year plan.
How can that be so far down on the list? It's undulating.
Right. I'll show you as we go through. So we also have traffic studies. We have some money earmarked for Lincoln Avenue, Pennsylvania to Nevada. There have been a few fatalities or accidents at Lincoln in Ohio. There is concerns about lighting, so we want to study that through that zone. So we've earmarked some money for that. And then same thing up at Lincoln at 1 South and 1 North. We've had numerous complaints. We thought we had a viable plan, but as we began to study it, we felt that there was some safety concerns with some of the plan that we had developed. And you know, this is a major road, meaning that people are coming through there high volume, moderate speeds. So whatever we do, we need to make sure that we do it in a safe manner. So part of the study could be that as a result, this may possibly come into where there's a median that has to be installed, which means the road has to be widened. That's a significant capital cost. So right now we need to study that further. We also are looking at with the MTD if we can get maybe some changes in discharging of the buses that could maybe alleviate some of those concerns too. We also have traffic studies that we perform in-house. One of them would be the at the middle school there at Vine Street and Fairlawn. We're looking at possibly installing one of those flashing rectangular rapid flashing beacons at that location. So unfunded projects. So these are projects that are not currently in the system. One of the similarities to all of these projects is the cost, the sheer magnitude of these projects. So East Florida Avenue would be basically east of Savannah Green all the way to High Cross Road. That's estimated at 3.3. So in relation to Ms. Marlin's question, Florida Avenue from Busey to Vine, that's about a $3 million project. So when you see what we have as far as money to deal with, we would have to save the money to be able to do that project. Now, what we're looking at, though, with projects of this magnitude, we start to look at matching grants or federal funds or state capital bills. That's where it can come into play within the 5-year plan. So we have a 5-year plan, but what happens is we seek out the additional funds to help us lower our cost. Then we have to revise the 5-year plan to get the matching local. At this point, though, there is still good pavement in the middle of that street that can basically get us through a period of time. So that's why we're at where we're at with this.
The middle of what street?
Of Florida Avenue from Busey to Vine. Relative to other streets, there is still good pavement in the middle of that street.
Down the center of the street?
Yes, down the center of the street. And that's why we restriped the street, which we have to restripe again because the stripes have worn off.
So what are the chances of a capital bill?
That's a good question.
You want me to answer that?
No.
Yeah.
When we have a new governor.
I'll put a plug in for what are the chances of capital bill. Currently, there's a, oh gosh, it's a lockbox referendum.
Lockbox amendment.
That's a hot topic right now last week in Springfield, and if given approval, this could be a referendum in November, and the beauty of it is $500 million statewide is siphoned off onto non-road collected user tax, user fee for roads. Income revenue is used for other general revenue issues in Springfield, and this could provide dollars to all the highway authorities throughout the state. I don't know what $500 million, how much of that would go to local governments and what would that mean for Urbana, but the good news is that if there's a user fee and whether it's sales tax or price per gallon or whatever it might be, the sticker in your vehicle, those dollars collected intended for roads should stay for roads and bridges and not be used for other purposes. So that's a potential referendum. So that would be helpful in the absence of a capital bill, which is usually some other bond money spent on identified funding sources. So we've done well in the past, but we don't have a budget in Springfield, so it's hard to talk about a capital project.
Mayor Preston?
Could you say how much of the total money's been diverted? What percentage roughly? Is it 25% or 10% or what?
I don't know percentage. I just know it's $500 million.
And that's the state motor fuel tax diverted to other purposes.
Road revenues that are used for other purposes.
Thanks.
So, with Florida, I mean, I realize there's some concerns of not including in the plan. I think you should understand, though, if we do it including in the plan, then some of those other projects come off the list. And it's not just one, it's several projects that have to come off the list to get that project done. So when we weighed it out, we felt that this project could also be a candidate for surface transportation program funds in the future, too. And by the time, let's say, several years down the road, we would come back to our reoccurring cycle with the Metropolitan Planning Organization and have what we feel is a decent chance to get federal funds for this project. Yes, sir.
Now, you identified a number of crossing safety issues, that is, locations, but could not those be addressed independently and sooner than resurfacing or reconstruction of those roads?
If we were able to identify through the study, and part of the study would be collecting data that would maybe show that there is a safety hazard there, then we could try to seek maybe some highway safety funds, program funds. But we still have to first gather the information, gather the data, and then see what we can do. Unfortunately, a lot of the highway safety money is geared towards fatalities. So if you have a fatality, it scores really high. Well, we don't, and we'll cross our fingers we do not have one there. That's basically the metric that they really use a lot.
How many pedestrian or bicycle, I don't think we've had any fatalities recently, but injuries or fatalities maybe, if I don't know about them.
There was one bicycle fatality within the last 5 years, and that was west of Green, where a bicyclist was struck by a drunk driver, but the bicyclist was also had been drinking too. But other than that, I don't recall any of those. There have been some pedestrian fatalities though through the city. On University Avenue, there's been a few, and that actually precipitated the road safety audit. There was one on Main Street west of Race, and then actually we were able to get highway safety money for that to improve that intersection. So when these things happen, we do try to proactively seek out the funding sources.
Mayor Preston?
I want to talk about the state having a capital bill. Some years ago, we were unable to get federal money because we didn't have one. So do we have one now, or do we need to get a new one? Does it have to be done every year?
I'm sorry, did you say a state capital bill?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, well, the last one was Illinois Jobs Now. There was a 5-year bill, and it ended in 2014. There hasn't been one since.
So we're losing out on federal money then?
No. Well, we're not.
The state is. The state of
possibly could
Illinois, when I
be.
say we.
Yeah, but no, locally we're not losing out on any federal dollars. But that is a concern. I'd have to research if the state's losing federal dollars with their match. I don't have that answer.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions for Craig?
I have a few
Oh, you
more
have some
slides.
more? Okay.
Yeah. So we have also unfunded street resurfacing projects. We have a list here, and keep in mind these are just the worst of the worst. There's still other streets not shown here. I won't go through all of these, but you can see that there's a subtotal there of about $4.2 million. We have some unfunded reconstruction projects as well. Anderson from Pennsylvania to Fair Lawn is pretty bad, so there's some need there. We have some other resurfacing projects that are for collector streets, and when you total all those up, they're about $3.8 million. The reason I'm showing these numbers is just so you get a magnitude cost of the worst of the worst. There's still streets that aren't shown here that need help. So we're just trying to do the best that we can to keep this system together. We also have unfunded patching projects. I get asked a lot about Ray Street from Meadow Drive to north of Windsor. That street is showing severe distress. We have bike lanes on that street. We're looking at $1.2 million almost to repatch that street. It's a long street. It's getting tired. But as you can tell, when we have 2.2 annually to work from, that's about half of our funds. So now, we got any questions?
Bill Gray.
Important to note a couple things as far as IDOT state projects in 2017, 2018. The state will be resurfacing Cunningham Avenue pretty much from 5 Points north, north of Airport Road. So that project's in the works. And as I understand the University Avenue safety improvements, and we had a presentation by IDOT and a consultant for IDOT, several months ago now. That project is probably in the FY17-18 timeframe for IDOT. So I'm not aware that there's going to be any local match for that project, but there might be some things that are in city interest to do that are beyond the scope of IDOT. So for the most part, that should be a state-funded project, but that's, again, over a year from now. And we don't have any details other than the suggested improvements that you saw when they made that presentation.
I think Eric was first.
Do you have a sense of how the state of our streets and roads compares to other comparable cities?
Well, I've talked to my peers, and I think we're all struggling. I think actually most of the cities, if you drive through a city, the roads are not in very good shape. I think, though, some of the, there are certain cities up north in certain counties that do very well, but they have supplemental funding from property taxes or sales taxes or whatever. But I would say most in central Illinois that I see, and maybe Bill can weigh in, but when we talk to our peers, we're all struggling.
So the northern counties that you're talking about are the collar counties that are quite wealthy, yeah.
Aaron?
So if they're going to do from 5 Points north to Airport Road, I'm just going out on a limb here, just like you talked about Broadway, and we partnered with the Park District to do the multi-purpose path, right? Are there opportunities and openings to say, well, listen, if you're going to already do from 5 Points all the way north to Airport Road, and we want to do from Main Street to University, is that an opportunity to work with the state to say, let's just go from Main to Airport Road or something like that?
There is. Actually, I inquired about that, and there was a fatal flaw in that thinking. I can't recall what it was, but we'd still have to pay. It's not like we wouldn't pay, but there would be a bigger economy of scale. And I'd have to get that answer. But I did pursue that action, and it's a good thought.
Okay.
Anyone else? Bill?
So Craig has laid out pretty vividly, what we can and what we can't do. And I just, an earlier conversation tonight, for the last 25 years, there's been a lot of streets that have been reconstructed, resurfaced, a lot of sidewalks that have been upgraded with brick banding. There's been lots of reconstruction of streets. There's all new street lighting. There's boneyard improvements. There's a parking deck that's been around for 25 years. Folks, that would not have happened without a TIF district, I'm sorry to say. So we talk about the economic development potential of TIF districts, but from my perspective, that TIF 1 and TIF 2 has been hugely successful and providing public works infrastructure improvements to downtown Urbana. And without that, are we going to take more money from local motor fuel tax to pay for Broadway improvements? No. I mean, how are you going to make it work? So, and this is outside of Craig's responsibility, but Motor Vehicle Parking System Fund work is being used as we speak to do repairs to the parking deck. Now, that's an operations division function, but that's a capital dollars, if you will, to fix the parking deck, and that work's going on. And if you see parking closed off and being done in piecemeal, that's because of the prep work before we finally seal coat that lot at the very end. So.
And I'd just add that for Broadway, I enjoyed how well that turned out, and I've noticed that there has been an increase in traffic there because people don't have to drive on the bricks anymore. They're probably finding new shortcuts and stuff. So I wonder, as Lincoln gets finished, do you have some way to predict what the increase in traffic will be because of new patterns? Has anybody tried to model that?
There has been some modeling, you know, and I think there. You know, we do that based upon what we see historically in locations like that, but it's still, for forecasting, you know, it's still crystal ball. So you really don't know how it's going to fully turn out. You think that, well, it's anticipated that we'll get increased traffic, though, just from the sheer fact that people can avoid other routes and go on a nice new route to cross over the railroad tracks there.
Okay. And I also noticed on Broadway there was a house that went up for sale about 2 weeks ago, and it's sold already. So I think it actually improves property values, too, to have a nice street and a nice multi-use path across the street and everything.
Okay.
Diane, did you have something?
Yeah, one was going back to the question about striping and timing, for example, for striping bike lanes. I go down Race Street several times a day, and last year the striping didn't occur till maybe September or October, and which was past the prime biking season, and then it's worn off again. And so how do you determine timing on stuff like that?
Well, to be honest with you, timing comes down to staff availability. So staff is handling it. We're not farming that out to consultants. And the same people that did Broadway Avenue reconstruction, same staff, are doing the pavement markings.
Okay.
So it really comes down to the fact that it's when they can squeeze, when we can squeeze time in to get things done. It's the same thing with Bradley Avenue bike lanes. I'm going to be the principal designer on that, but to be honest with you, I can't get to it at this point. So as soon as I can, I'll get to it. But it's a list of projects or demands, and we have to fit it in when we can. Now, ideally, so you set that aside. Yeah, we would love to do that in a better environment than September, October. I can tell you on the seal coating question, we now are not doing those things in October anymore because they don't last either. Same thing with the resurfacing. We've done some resurfacing after Halloween, and we don't do that anymore because of the weather. So I mean, all these weather impacts haven't, you know, and then you add in the University of Illinois and the children and all these other constraints. We really have this small window when we work to really get things done. And unfortunately, to get that window, you've got to have everything lined up perfectly to meet that window. So it just really comes down to timing of staff's availability.
Dennis?
And Bill, could you briefly repeat the impact of that the TIF district has had on street repair and sidewalk repair in the downtown area for the public?
Sure. Since the inception of TIF 1 and TIF 2, virtually every street downtown has had some sort of major resurfacing or reconstruction. Sidewalk reconstruction, it's an upgraded, more decorative sidewalk with brick banding that goes as far south as Illinois Street around Lincoln Square in the downtown streets. We have all new lighting, decorative lighting downtown with the TIF dollars. The parking deck was built Actually, in the late 80s, it was bonded with TIF money to repay the parking deck, 200-space deck. The Boneyard improvements we just completed, the new bridge, the Race and Broadway improvements are all TIF dollars. So my point is that from a public works infrastructure standpoint, TIF 1 and TIF 2 have been extremely successful in providing those projects that the other available dollars, you saw 2.1 million today, dollars available, we would not have been able to touch those projects absent a TIF. Even with the city increment, which is now property tax dollars, property tax money does not effectively go to any road work to speak of. Okay, now, maybe Elizabeth and I would argue a little bit about A09 having property tax dollars, but for the most part, that's pensions, library, and what have you. There's other funding sources. So my point is, no TIF district, those dollars wouldn't be going for roads per se, and we don't have the money in the local and state motor fuel taxes or the modest amount from A09 to pay for those projects. So that's why, in my assessment of the last 25, 30 years, yeah, it's a huge impetus. TIF 3, same thing. TIF 4, Craig talked about. We would not be reconstructing Airport Road today or in the works right now if it wasn't for TIF 4. We would not have done the sidewalk work that you saw on the bus last Monday night on Cunningham Avenue. That's TIF 4 money. TIF 4 money even helped out Airport Road east of Cunningham Avenue, a modest amount. Some of that was TIF 4 money. Okay, there's been some landscaping improvements in 5 Points that have been TIF 2 and TIF 4 money in and around the credit union and the Walgreens area, the lighting and the flowers and, you know, upgrades of that sort. So the list goes on, and I think the CD report in 2 weeks will show a lot of those public infrastructure improvements, but they wouldn't happen, you know, without that increment. And I think, yeah, that's a positive. That's something that I would like to make sure you're all aware of as a positive of what a TIF district can do.
Go ahead, Diane.
Can you make this PowerPoint available on the website?
Sure.
I think
Yes.
I'd like to share it with a number of
Sure.
people. Okay, great.
Sure.
I had a question about the pavement management system.
Mhm.
When you bring that up during budget time, I guess, will there be some kind of payback period estimate or cost-benefit analysis? And I know it's hard to, I mean, putting $100,000 toward it and then $50,000 a year to not, you know, just to find out that, yeah, the roads that we thought were bad are bad, and maybe map them and stuff wouldn't be a good investment. But I can also imagine that there may be maybe examples of other cities that put it in place that might have used it to save money or improve efficiencies and come back with a financial benefit to it. Is that possible?
I think so.
Yeah, that's available. Boy, dozens of communities in Illinois have these sorts of financial management planning purposes for street and pavements, and time tonight doesn't allow us to get into those details, but it's just a tool that Craig and I and others don't have internally, and it would just be very helpful to better assess what applications should be going on when, and also, you know, the questions that council raises as to, okay, what are the unfunded projects, and we can list them out there. Well, what would it take for us to start to maybe make a bigger dent in that multi-million-dollar backlog? You know, is it another $200,000 a year? Is it another $800,000 a year? Is it a whatever? City of Champaign for about 5 years has been using such a model, and that was very instrumental for them to sell the hotel motel tax. That increment was about $700,000. I could be off a little bit, but dollars. And part of the sales of that to their council was, this is what we can do to raise our pavement condition index from, throw a number out, 50 to 60, from fair to good or better. Right now, we can't provide that to you.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else? Thank you very much.
Okay. So in the 23rd, Brad and Bill will be here for the adopting resolution or ordinance for the capital improvement plan.
Okay, thanks. Next on the agenda is resolution number 2016-05-027R, resolution approving and authorizing the execution of a promotional and marketing agreement for Pygmalion Festival. Libby Tyler.
Before I present that, I did have some quick staff report items, if that's all right. Okay. So it's Historic Preservation Month. Just did a proclamation, and there are some very interesting events being held courtesy of our Historic Preservation Commission. Wednesday night, May 11th, will be the first of 3 series, and this will be from, all of the events are 7 to 8 p.m. at the Lewis Auditorium in the Urbana Free Library. This Wednesday's topic is What Style Is It? Understanding Architectural Styles in Urbana, and the presenter is Alice Novak, who's our chair of the commission. Next Wednesday, May 18th, would be Good Form, Understanding Vernacular Building Types in Urbana, again presented by Alice Novak. The following Wednesday, May 25th, all Historic Preservation Month topics, presented by Stuart Burlocker, will be the topic Hidden History of Urbana's Antebellum Houses, Neighborhood Stories and Fact. Also, it is a busy week. Tomorrow night, we are hosting, in conjunction with the Urbana Independent Media Center, an announcement where we're going to be announcing funding for a new youth arts initiative in downtown Urbana. The doors over at the IMC will open at 6:30, and the announcement, news conference announcement, will be made at 7:30 p.m. tomorrow, May 10th, at the Urbana-Champaign Independent Media Center, 202 South Broadway, Post Office Building. Thursday, there's more. There are actually 2 events that coincide. There is a bus tour being hosted by Habitat for Humanity and the Attorney General's Office, as well as the Urbana Home Consortium, our Home Consortium, and IDA, Illinois Housing Development Authority, to tour the neighborhood bus tour to highlight the projects funded by the Attorney General's grant team. Thursday, May 12th, 5:30 p.m. Meet at 119 East University Avenue, and please RSVP to Sheila Dodd with cuhabitat.org. There will also be a neighborhood meeting Thursday night, May 12th, 6:30 to 8 p.m., Lewis Auditorium, regarding the Lincoln Plaza project, which is proposed at Lincoln and Nevada, and that is hosted by the developer. We had in your packet the April Business and Development Report, and I would just highlight a few things. You've probably noticed downtown, both Curbanas are installed, as well as a new bike corral, which is in front of Lacey's Barbecue, and be interesting to see. It's a fairly simple way to add significant amount of parking that's very visible, so we expect that folks will begin to use that. And it has gotten nice and busy downtown with the improved weather. It's been great to see that. We've been working closely with the school district on the Washington School bids. We've fielded a number of inquiries from developers, and they are opening those bids up on Wednesday. On the upcoming events, I noticed some of these dates I think are off. The Business and Development Luncheon, Keeping Your Property Safe, will be May 24th. And the May Food Truck Rally, that's actually the last Tuesday of the month. So we had that last week, so that'll be May 31st, because that's the last Tuesday in May. And there's a new feature in the report where we focus on an area update, and this month's update was for the Boneyard Creek area. Any questions on the staff report?
Diane?
Yeah, the first paragraph reports that there have been reports of multiple lots being sold under the Think Urbana program. When will we be getting an update on how that program is going?
How that's coming. Yeah, we're really just beginning to launch that, but we can give some more details on that. We're spreading the word. We've had a number of presentations
Right.
to different groups, so that's the phase that we're at now, and you'll begin to see more of the advertising as well. So we can.
But are we actually collecting that data as far as the number of homes built, lots sold?
We do collect information on lots and permits. And it might be too early to really give you a full report, but we will do that soon for you.
And I would just say, we have got to get a permanent name for the Boneyard Creek Improvement Project. That's just not sexy enough. I mean, we've had suggestions. We kind of stalled on getting a permanent name. So I think we really need to come up with something so we have a location that we can point people to.
Yeah, we'd like to improve the wayfinding and the visibility of the park. It's a beautiful park, and it's not as visible as we'd like it to be.
So I have a new suggestion, which I'll email you and let you all think about it.
Okay. In your packet is a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of a promotional and marketing agreement for Pygmalion Festival. This would be for the 2016 festival. This is based off of the agreement that was approved last year for 2015. It focuses on the what will be the second annual technology conference that will be hosted in Urbana at the Krannert Center. And Urbana would be featured as a co-sponsor of that event. There was a detailed presentation by the promoter, Fine Bersoni Incorporated, a few weeks back. And there's information attached about the event last year. And again, the format of the agreement is essentially the same as last year's. It just has the different dates. And I would note that under the fiscal impacts, we would need to include this in the general fund budget for next year. The amount of the sponsorship that's being requested is $5,000, the same as last year. And there's also the same request for the in-kind services of the racking, the crowd barriers that's set forth in the agreement. And Mr. Fine and Mr. Singer are here if you have any questions for them. Want to come forward?
Are there any questions for Libby or for Seth or Patrick? Charlie.
This actually might be a question for Public Works. I don't understand the racking and crowd control barriers, because are these going to be used around Krannert, or are these going to be used in downtown Champaign?
Champaign.
Downtown Champaign.
Yeah.
So what, Public Works delivers them and sets them up, or?
No. John Collins requests that we come and pick them up, and so we do.
Oh, so you just, oh, okay, you, so
Yeah,
you just, you borrow the.
I rent a U-Haul.
You rent a U-Haul, you borrow our control barriers.
Unless you
okay,
got, you got a
yes.
truck?
No,
Come on,
nope,
Charlie.
nope, that sounds fine. Okay, I didn't understand exactly how
No,
it
for
was-
sure, and
yeah,
it's
okay.
something we're appreciative of.
Okay,
Very, very
gotcha,
appreciative.
that's an easy one. So essentially, this is just a standard sponsorship, like a corporate sponsorship of the event.
Yeah, I mean, sure. If you, sure.
Mayor Presson.
Okay, I was kind of puzzled by the fact that you say you have $250,000. Did you ever give a budget that shows what the $250,000 is funded? Where it comes from and?
Like where all of the funding goes and where
Yeah,
everything.
where it comes from and how you spend it.
We
Did
have.
you ever give that to the city or? not?
No, it's probably not in our best interest to disclose what every single private business is giving us, and we definitely can't disclose what we're paying artists. We'd be in a lot of trouble if we did that.
Dennis.
And so there are images from last year's program that showed activities that were in the Urbana downtown area. What activities will occur in Urbana itself in the downtown this year?
Well, we don't know if anything will happen in downtown or not yet. That's why we're trying to emphasize Krannert Center.
Are you working with local businesses right now to try to place conversations or music events in downtown Urbana this year?
Honestly, there's not a lot of good options for us in downtown Urbana to place live music within the confines of what we do at Pygmalion. Just having a stage and just having a business that is available to us doesn't necessarily make it viable for us as a festival. Last year, we kind of learned that between the Rose Bowl and the Iron Post. I don't want to get into too many details about the absolute realities of what it means to bring in touring acts and expectations of what stages and PA infrastructure and staffing and promotion and hospitality entails. But with what we're doing and how we're planning Pygmalion, there's not a lot of good options for us in downtown Urbana at the present moment. Now, we could. There's no question that we could. We have that option. I'm definitely not saying that, like, well, we just can't do it. I'm saying that within the structure of our scope and what we're trying to accomplish, we have an extraordinarily limited budget. And this year's state budget impasse has really affected it even further. A lot of our funding comes from University of Illinois facilities, Parkland College, and other organizations that are tied to what's happening in the state. So we're having to do some paring down of things. We're having to tighten up, and we're having to get creative as to how we are going to fund what it is that we want to do and what we want to accomplish. And that's to further perpetuate what culture means to Champaign-Urbana. We're fortunate that we have Krannert Center for the Performing Arts as a really, really tremendous sponsor. Their facility provides us the type of professionalism and the type of space that we need to be able to host what it is that we're looking to do. And in this particular case, what we're really looking to do with the tech component is to highlight and showcase all of the amazing innovation and technological advancement that we have in this community and put it against a backdrop of live music and comedy and tech speakers and food, so that there's not just a echo chamber, so that there's all different types of people being integrated into this event. So that's why we're really focused on Krannert Center. Now, is it possible that we might have an opportunity to do something in downtown Urbana, a panel discussion, a show? Yes, it's possible. But it's not something that we're going to say, yes, we can definitely do this, because we just don't really know if we're going to have the money or the space or the time.
And so you're inviting then the tech businesses that are located in Urbana to come to what, Krannert Center? Is that going to be the focal point of the presentations for the techs?
That's going to be, yes, and on Thursday, September 22nd, there will be, as opposed to a demo day, there'll be a demo evening, essentially, that will be paired with headlining musicians, speakers, and potentially comedians. Again, it just depends. And yes, we're inviting a wide variety of people from within the community to come and showcase. And by showcase, I mean present something that's interactive and visual and tangible to engage. We learned last year that we can't just set up booth space for people to just like promote their whatever. It's got to be something that like somebody has created, something that a student or a community member would look at and say, that's awesome, or I don't like that, but something that's visual, something that's interactive. And so as an example, like from Urbana, you know, Mike Koulas is developing the game Overload here in Urbana, and like obviously we've been speaking with him about like showcasing that for the first time publicly. Similarly with you know, like Personify, Sanjay and the collab, you know, finding ways to be able to demonstrate what it is they actually do. So will there be businesses from Champaign as well? Yes, of course.
And then I've been to interactive displays in Krannert Center that were located in the Studio Theater. Is that are you going to be using some of the venues like that, or are these going to be like in the hallway, in the general lobby?
The demo itself will be in the lobby. The theaters that are available will be used for performances and speakers and authors.
All right.
I'll move approval of this resolution.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Moved by Eric and seconded by Diane. Aaron.
Yes, indeed. Seth, how you doing, man?
Aaron.
Yes, indeed. So do you partner with the food trucks? So like, would they be lined up in front of Krannert Art Museum, Krannert Performing Arts?
I want to say this with as much definition as I can. We are still, kind of pounding our way through programming, and by that I mean like headlining acts. I wish that I could impart or take a chip and take what's in my brain and put it into yours so that you could understand the growing discussion that surrounds festivals and artist fees and radius clauses and the seemingly endless amount of festivals that keep cropping up in Chicago and now St. Louis as well. And after doing this for 12 years, the landscape has changed. So right now, what we're trying to do is to program this thing as best as we possibly can with what resources we have available and make a really exciting lineup. And then once we cross that finish line, which should happen in the next couple of weeks, we can start piecing together like the tangential components. So are we going to have food trucks? That's the goal, yeah.
Okay, thanks. Are there any other discussion? If not, Dennis?
Yeah, this is a discussion. Right, so, I mean, I'm going to support this. This is not a great financial stress for the city to promote this arts event. You did approach the Arts Commission in Urbana and ask for additional funding, but I think you were turned down, and one of the reasons why I understand that that was true is that your proposal was rather vague, and they didn't really understand quite
You're talking about the Public Arts
Commission.
Yeah, we did that last year, but we
I
didn't.
think that was
Yeah.
even before the process of this discussion had started.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, but for the city to participate in a major festival and to be recognized as a participant, I think it's worth the money at this time. But I do hope that you find a way to, and if you're holding venues outside of Crandard, are you?
Yeah.
Are you holding venues in downtown Champaign?
Yes.
Well, then I think if you come back next year with this request, I probably wouldn't support it because I'd kind of expect both cities to be treated fairly equally. And, if that's a problem, then I have a problem too. But at this time, I'll support it.
Sure.
Anyone else? Okay, all in favor of the resolution, or sending the resolution to council and with recommendation for approval, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next up is resolution number 2016-05-028R, a resolution amending the City of Urbana Municipal Electric Aggregation Plan of Operations and Governance. Scott Tess from Public Works.
Good evening. I'd like to share just a few background details of the resolution and the amended Plan of Operations and Governance before you. First, all cities that operate a municipal electric aggregation program are required by state statute to adopt a plan of operations and governance. Second, the city adopted such a plan in 2012 by resolution. And third, I want to share just briefly 4 changes that we're proposing to make to that plan tonight. One, to make some of the language more clear and consistent. 2, to remove some language that we refer to as the meet or beat clause. 3, to remove an obligation for the city to send a mail notification to households if the city decides not to enter into a municipal electric aggregation agreement in the future. And 4, to enable the mayor with staff support to make minor amendments such as these in the future and notify the council. I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Diane?
Yeah, on page 4, item number 3, I think that's the meter beat clause that's being eliminated.
Correct.
So what happens if the default rate falls below what we're paying? What are we stuck with this contract?
So what's happened is over the years the supply market has tightened, and our consultant has advised us that we will not get a competitive bid for municipal electric aggregation on a term contract where with a meter B clause. Nonetheless, individual residents can always opt out of the program anytime they like. So in a sense, every resident has a meter B clause for themselves. The city just doesn't have a clause whereby we can cancel the contract for all of our residents mid-contract.
How will the residents be notified if that rate falls below their?
We've done press release, website information, notices at council, and that sort of media in the past.
When that rate goes below?
Correct.
Okay, and then one other question was, on page 7, when new residents move into the community, they're not automatically included in the program. So my question was, how are they notified about the existence of the program?
Our vendor provides notification. I'm going to ask Mike to contribute. I don't remember if there's a certain time of the year or certain times of the year that they do that, but I know they have a strategy to capture.
I think they do that on an
transient.
ongoing basis. They update their list. They've got software, so they can do that on a monthly basis. So
So they mail?
Yeah.
They mail something to the
they
new
get an
residents?
opt-out letter when they move
Okay,
in.
okay. All right, thanks.
Anyone else? Questions? Charlie?
I'll just move to send this to council with recommendation for approval.
I'll second.
Eric?
So what is the reason for the clause that the mayor will be able to make amendments without council approval? Is that because it needs to be done sometimes in a timely way, or what is the reason?
Well, there can be a time consideration, but I think primarily just viewing this as staff level policy that the changes are fairly minor, and I expect that even these changes that we have tonight are probably the most substantial that we'll ever see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Any discussion? If not, it is moved by Smythe, seconded by Roberts to send this resolution to council with recommendation for approval. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries.
Thank you.
Next, we'll skip to item number 11. An ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 3.5, amendments to ambulance services ordinance. Chief Knightlinger.
Okay, tonight we're going to discuss some updates that we've been working on for a while to our ambulance ordinance. And I've brought with me tonight Division Chief Odell. He's our program manager for our emergency medical services. And also present tonight in the audience are representatives from both ambulance services. I'd like to begin by saying that both of our ambulance services are very, very valuable partners to the fire department in delivering our emergency medical services. And our EMS calls amount to half of the calls that our fire department runs. So between the fire department and the ambulance service, that's a very valuable service to our citizens. And I think the level of care that our citizens receive both from the fire department and ambulance services are second to none. So as we start talking about this ambulance ordinance, I want to apologize on the physical impact part on the bottom. As far as the ambulance fees, we've made that a part of the fee schedule, and we stated that it would be discussed in a separate item, but we'll go ahead and discuss that as part of our discussion, and then Elizabeth Hannon can provide some details on how the figure that we've arrived at, how we come to that figure. Some of the most significant changes proposed are some of the medical technology, the training requirements and the documentation of that training, some big changes in driver safety. As we look at the requirements that we have for our drivers in the fire department as far as how to handle an emergency vehicle in the city on emergency response, and how we pay attention to the traffic laws and you know, we try to operate safely to keep our citizens safe. We looked at all of those requirements and we said, well, we should just repeat these requirements for our ambulance companies. So a lot of the language that you're seeing in here is the exact language that we have in our fire department policies for safe operation of fire apparatus. And so the ambulance services, we'd like to be held to the same standard that we hold our drivers to. Other changes in this ordinance include the ambulance fee. There was already some fines that we had in our city code pertaining to ambulances, but they weren't really described in the ambulance ordinance, so we added those descriptions. Additionally, we're introducing a new fine, and that new fine is in response to the ambulances meeting their response goals. And we have response goals for the ambulances of arriving within 8 minutes on a B level to E level calls. And so the B level being a less significant call and an E level being the most significant, we require our ambulances to arrive within 8 minutes of being dispatched, 90% of the time. Okay, so when they don't meet that goal, you know, we've always said, well, you haven't complied, but there was never a penalty for not meeting that goal. So we're introducing a penalty of $25 per incident that they don't meet that response goal 90% of the time. Now, for an A-level call, which is a very basic call, we give them a goal of 12 minutes from dispatch to arrival, and again, 90% of the time. And the fine would also be present on that. So I'll entertain any questions you have now on this ordinance.
Eric?
You said you would discuss the change in the license fee during this item.
Yes.
So could you enlighten us on why that changed to the extent that it did?
Okay. For a long time, we've had an ambulance fee of $500. And I think the last time a fee increase was proposed was probably 2009, and I think it failed. And as we move along with providing the services we provide, the services are very expensive. We have to train EMT eyes, and currently I think 66% of our people are eye level or greater. But we haven't trained EMTIs since the fall of '08, so we're approaching 9 years since we haven't trained any. We've maintained our numbers by being able to hire paramedics. And we may or may not always be able to continue to do that, but through our testing process, it seems that some of the paramedics that test always end up fairly high on our list to get hired. So that's really contributed to us maintaining our numbers. Additionally, dispatching costs have risen significantly over the last few years, and just our dispatching portion of our medical calls amount to just a little over $50,000 a year to dispatch those medical calls that we respond to. Additionally, we have administrative costs and that run, you know, a little bit in excess of $8,000 a year considering administrative time. And so coupling all these together, we have a lot of expense as far as providing this service, and this proposal would just refund just a fraction of that. And,
what is I was trying to scroll through this to see, but I'm not seeing it again. What is the new license fee? Is
the new license fee proposed is $12,000 per service. Yes.
Up from 500.
Up from 500.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
So I did a little searching of ambulance license fees in other cities, and the range that I saw, maybe I've missed some, was $200 to $600. So
yeah, there's probably 2 exceptions we know of fairly close to that rule, and that would be Peoria's is $85,000 at this point, and Pekin's is $55,000 per year.
Wow.
And those were significantly higher, and I'm not sure of all the reasons they were. We just evaluated our expenses and based it on a portion of our expenses, and And so we've tossed around a number for a while on what we thought would be fair, but it just kept rolling to the fact that it's very expensive to provide this service. And in the end, we had Elizabeth evaluate the areas of expense, and I mean, she can expand on how we arrived at that number.
So I'm trying to think about people who are, you know, the people who by accident or illness require an ambulance, and look at the costs to them. How does this prorate to how much more expensive an individual ambulance call for a patient or a family might be?
That would probably be a question for both the ambulance providers, because we don't send a bill for our services. So we're not sure exactly how that would impact them, if at all.
Yeah. I mean, it'll impact it some because they'll have to pass the additional expense through, but if it's, you know, depends on how many calls they make. I just wonder how many calls an ambulance goes on per year, and dividing that into 12,000, what that would be.
Dennis?
Yeah, so it's a pretty huge jump, and I did talk with our finance director and got some information from that department about, you know, some of the parameters of why the expenses are so high. It's very much personnel costs involved. So I guess I was wondering if we have 2 ambulance services that are in operation 24/7 from the hospitals to which the victims of an event will be taken to. What are we providing a service that's actually a duplication of existing services in the community, and how vital is it to double up to have the fire department arrive at the same accident as the ambulance? Are the ambulance drivers not trained as efficiently or as completely as the eye-level training of the fire department members?
Yeah, so we don't really see it as a duplication of services. As we explained before, our stations are strategically placed throughout the city, so we do arrive before the ambulances arrive very often.
Very often?
Yes. You know, obviously, whenever we're responding out of the downtown station, a lot of times that ambulance is stationed here as well, so we'll arrive at the same time. You know, just last week we actually had 4 cardiac arrest patients, and 2 of which we brought their pulse back. So I don't think it's a duplication of services. We work really well together. We start that initial treatment, and then if the patient requires us to ride in, we'll ride in with the ambulance. You know, it's industry standard for the fire departments to respond on medical calls, just basically because where we're located and how fast we can access the patients. Our training is very similar to what the ambulances provide. Obviously, as being paramedics, they give a few more medications. They have some monitors that will do 12 leads and stuff like that to check for heart attacks. So they have some sophisticated equipment that we don't carry. But it's really not a duplication of services.
So it's really, in your mind, a public safety
100%, yes. I mean, we wouldn't want a neighbor to the fire station on South Philo Road to have a medical emergency and the fire department not to respond. I mean, because seconds really do matter.
Diane?
Well, could you go through, Elizabeth, the process you went through to arrive at this $12,000 figure?
Yeah, and just to be clear, I didn't arrive at the $12,000 fee. What I did was evaluate the costs based on the work associated with this. That information was provided to me by the fire department. I actually arrived at a higher number. So they basically described to me 4 cost areas. So one was administration of the ordinance, which is done by a division chief, and that requires 10 hours monthly. And when you cost that, including all the overhead and benefits, based on the number of hours worked in a year, that cost is about $8,250 a year. The big cost here, and I think Brian agreed that, you know, this shouldn't be 100% attributed to the ambulance companies, was our dispatch cost for MetCAD, which is about $50,500 a year. It's $20.28 for every call that's dispatched. And then on each call, generally, our firefighters assist the ambulance crew. It might be moving the patient into the ambulance or riding in the ambulance, or Derek could probably describe that a little bit better. But he estimated that on an average call that requires about 20 minutes of a firefighter's time, but with nearly 2,500 calls in a typical year, that's the average over the past 3 years, the cost for that in a year is about $40,000. And then a small amount for supplies that's not reimbursed. So I think our total costs, the way that I documented them, are over $67,000. You know, obviously the determination of the fee, as long as it's not higher than that, I would consider that something that we could defend if somebody decided to, you know, take us to court and complain about it. So my concern is really the upper limit. The $12,000, I think Brian and Derek could probably explain a little more how they arrived at that number.
Okay, again, our administrative costs, we came up with about $8,250. The MedCAD fee with that $50,500, when an ambulance is dispatched, MedCAD dispatches the fire truck and the ambulance at the same time, and that dispatch goes to the ambulance company per se. The ambulances all hear the dispatch, but the ambulance company decides which unit is in the best position to respond. I would say most likely based on where they're located at the time, and so they send that closest ambulance. And so MetCAD is actually notifying the ambulance company. The ambulance company then decides exactly which ambulance will respond, and then their dispatchers do that dispatch. Okay, so your ambulances are hearing the page, so if there's 3 ambulances in the area, they'll all move towards their vehicles, and then their dispatch center will decide exactly which ambulance goes. And then the ambulance dispatchers track all the response times and everything that ambulance is doing from that point. So MetCAD does not do all the work for the ambulance companies that they do for the fire department. Because when they dispatch our units, they dispatch the exact unit that's going to go, and they track all of their movements, and the dispatchers are available to communicate with our fire trucks when they're on a call. And so because of that, we assess 25% of the fee to the ambulance services as far as the MedCAD portion. So it took that $50,500 and reduced it to $12,600. Okay, the next component of the firefighters, we only figured the cost for one firefighter based on, instead of a crew of 3 which respond, and based on the number of calls is where we came up with the $40,000. And then the unreimbursed supplies came to about $6,300. So that final figure that Elizabeth came up with was $67,000, and which would have been $33,622 per ambulance service. We weighted that. It was on a 65% discount because of the public benefit. I mean, we at the fire department are here to provide the benefit to the taxpayer, so we discounted it 65% to come up with the $12,000.
So what's the charge for an ambulance call to the patient or the insurance company?
It must vary quite a bit. I mean, would I be out of line to say 1,000, 1,500, or? Sure.
Mayor Preston?
So you have a whole crew of, what, 3 firefighters on an engine?
Yes, that's correct. And at least one of those members is an advanced care provider, an EMTI or above.
So you're only counting one?
That's correct.
but really takes us more than that. So you're just heavily discounting this. You're discounting it when you measure the employees, and you're also discounting it at the end.
Yeah, and something else this doesn't include is that both ambulance companies reside in our fire station at the headquarters station here. And one ambulance company uses the campus fire station to keep their ambulance here, so their employees, stay in our fire stations. The garage door goes up that many more times, and we didn't have a good idea to figure out what that expense was for them to actually reside in our fire stations. But again, as Chief Neitlinger said, it's a benefit to have the ambulance companies in our town, reducing the response time. So I think that's a good partnership, but there is a cost to the city for them staying in our fire stations.
Dennis?
Well, that right there really explains a lot about the city's cost and how it becomes so high. So I appreciate that. That wasn't actually detailed in this report, which I think you missed something. Let me ask you, there's a couple of section numbers here that talks about how the ambulances cannot respond to calls into areas that are not approved by the fire department or that are outside the limits of the fire department range, or are not approved by the chief. This is page 11 and 12, section 3.5-56, 57 that I was reading. I made a note on personal note about those, and I was wondering, so if there's a call that's outside the fire department's jurisdiction, you're saying that we're not responding or we're not responsible to respond to those emergency calls?
I think what that's leaning towards is that we rotate ambulance companies on the 15th of the month, and we have to have some sort of order to when they're responding. So, for example, Professional Ambulance is in town until the 15th of this month. So all 911 calls they will be receiving. And what that is trying to do is say, hey, it's their turn in the barrel, if you will, to respond to 911 calls.
It says here, an ambulance service shall not respond to any requests for emergency assistance unless it is in compliance with the operational requirements set forth in this article, unless specifically authorized to respond by the fire chief. Now, I can't imagine the fire chief is actually like sitting at his desk saying, yeah, you can go to that one, but oh no, the one in Savoy, no, you can't go there now.
I think that refers to ambulance companies that aren't authorized and licensed in the city.
And are there some that serve this area that are not?
Right. Our two ambulance services that are licensed are the Presence-based system and the Carl-based system. And other ambulance services that would respond if we had a major incident in the city, say a school bus wreck or a tornado hit the town, a major disaster, they would be ambulance services that would be coming in from other communities that aren't licensed within the city. And
they wouldn't be allowed to operate.
They would be allowed to operate.
Or they would be fined if they did.
Yeah, they would be allowed to operate based on the fact that the fire chief would specifically
allow them to
respond into our city, and not having a license to operate in our city.
So we're not talking about individual emergencies, but you're talking about major disasters.
Yes.
Okay, because that's not very clear. It sounds like at any time when anybody has a heart attack and he happens to be over in Bonneville, there might be an issue whether we're going to be involved in that or not. And of course, it may not make any sense, but I mean, it's not clear what's happening there and what limitations are being required of other companies to respond.
And I think it's also saying that in this entire article on 57 that each agency must comply. 57 it specifically talks about dispatch procedures.
Okay.
And that they must stay in the compliance, you know, to be able to continue service.
So I'm just getting this wrong, as you're telling me. Okay.
Eric?
Maybe I thought I understood, now maybe I'm confused. My understanding is that the ambulances that are housed in our fire department would be responding from there only within our region, and that ambulances, for example, if there was an emergency, a personal emergency in Champaign, that would be up to a different system to respond to. Am I correct, or?
No, the ambulances cover a wide area. There's cases where the ambulance that's in our station would respond to, say, St. Joe or Sydney, based on its location, and then the ambulance service would take another ambulance at another location and move it into this station or somewhere in the city where it was in position to respond to our calls. So there's a constant move-up process of the ambulance systems using the closest ambulance for any emergency in the county.
I see. So, for example, if there was an emergency in Champaign and the ambulances that might respond from Champaign were over in Mahomet, then we would respond to that.
That's a definite possibility. I think they'd pull their ambulances from their central stations first, but I mean, if there was a great need, there's a possibility of pulling the ambulance from Urbana to that direction. Or any direction, whether it would be to Savoy or Rantoul or where it was needed.
How many vehicles do we expect to license? Is it 2?
This is ambulance companies, 2 ambulance companies, not
Oh,
vehicles.
okay, and the license is per company?
It's per company.
Okay. But each company would be housing 1 ambulance at a time in our facility?
That's correct.
Mayor Preston?
So if it was a heart attack in Champaign, MetCAD would dispatch to the Champaign Fire Department, and then the ambulance service would do whatever ambulance they felt was going to be closest to the job.
Yes.
So it could be the one in Urbana, but in that case, they'd get there after the fire department.
Yeah, it could be the one at their central station at Urbana or the one in West Champaign.
Okay.
Diane?
So the firefighters who show up at the same time as the ambulance, what do the firefighters do on the scene to assist the ambulance folks?
Sure. If they arrive at the same time, they're all doing patient care and they're working together. So in the basic sense of a call, they're going to do a patient assessment. They may be taking a blood pressure. They may be placing them on the heart monitor. And then some of the more acuity level, higher acuity level calls, that's when they're going to start IVs, give medications, place breathing tubes. So working together with the ambulance. I mean, they're both trained the same, so it's working with each other.
Charlie?
I support this. I think we could easily charge a lot more money than this. This helps to defray some of the higher costs that we've been seeing, all related to medical in general. So, and because it's we only have 15 minutes left tonight, I move to send this to council with a recommendation for approval.
I'll second that.
Okay, this is the motion on the ordinance. It doesn't have to do with the fees yet, but
Right, just the ordinance.
And is there more discussion, Aaron?
I still need to know how this cost will be passed on. I'm very curious as to how that works. I don't understand. So like in 2009, you said you guys came and brought this forward as a change then. Was it $12,000 then? Was it $1,000? Was it? This is a huge jump from $500 to $12,000, even though it's being explained. I don't understand why it was at $500 for so long.
I'd be guessing. I thought it was 15,000 is what was proposed in 2009.
And so we've been operating at $500 for how long?
I think it was 2003 was the last time the ordinance was
increased or the
addressed.
amount
Yeah.
was increased?
Yeah.
And it just seems like such a dramatic jump, and I don't understand, or I can't see why you guys didn't come in increments as the fees started to increase and say, look, we need another 500 or 600 to just go from $500 to $12,000, that's going to put a tremendous burden somewhere, and it's going to get passed on to the people who are going to have to pay for those ambulance calls, in my opinion. I'm just trying to figure out how that works, and so I'm really, really concerned about what that's going to look like for low-income people who are already saying, look, put me in a cab, anything other than put me in that ambulance, because I know what that cost is, and we're saying that's going to increase exponentially, and I have no idea what that's going to look like. I'm very concerned about that.
Mayor Preston.
How many calls are there per year in Urbana?
About 2,500 medical calls a year.
So 2,500.
It's 20 cents. Right now, it's 20 cents a call, and it becomes $4.80.
And that does not include the ambulance-only calls that the fire department does not respond on. And that's about another 1,000 to 1,200 calls.
Okay. Fire and ambulance is 2,500, and then another, what, 1,500?
Yeah, about 1,000 to 1,200 calls.
1,200.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not some huge increment per person.
To say 20 cents a call to $4 a call is a little misleading as well. I'm asking, how much is it going to cost the person who gets put in that ambulance when they get that bill? That's the part that I'm really, really concerned about. And so
we don't know what the bill is, though. So maybe we need to find out what the bill is.
There seems to be a partnership that's looming here between the fire department and the ambulance, right? And so they weren't prepared to answer a very fundamental question for me. And so I don't see how I can move forward with this without understanding how this is going to be passed on before I vote on it.
Eric.
Well, but whatever the charge is per call to the insurance company or to the patient, if this fee or if this increase in the license fee is passed through, it'll be a few dollars per call, which is going to be a very, very small fraction. And but I think, as I understand it, as I'm understanding it this evening, it seems to me that the city has been subsidizing this for years, and now we're looking to recapture not all but some of the costs. I don't know how common it is, for example, in other cities, for the ambulance companies to be housed in the municipal space. Is that common, or do we have a rather unusual arrangement in that respect?
I wouldn't even know. I wouldn't even be able to guess.
Yeah, I haven't surveyed that. There's a lot of fire-based ambulances throughout the state, and I know there's a lot of ambulance companies that do multiple locations, but we haven't really surveyed who actually houses an ambulance. I know in Danville they don't. Of course, Champaign and Urbana, we both house an ambulance, and in one case, the U of I's fire station, which we operate, one of the ambulance services houses an ambulance there, and the other service just stages an ambulance on campus. So in our city, there's an ambulance available in the campus area, and then closer to the east side of the city.
It seems to me reasonable for us on behalf of the taxpayers to recapture more of the cost that's associated with supporting this arrangement. And I'm guessing the ambulance owners are here, and you don't object to this license fee. You think that that's fair and absorbable as a reasonable cost of doing business? Is that true?
Definitely not an owner. I am a manager.
The manager.
And again, hear more to listen to the discussion tonight by the council to see what's going to be passed on, so that we've had discussions with the fire department, but again, we want to make sure that we understand what the ideas are of the council.
So you're not coming here as an adversary, or you're not coming here with a position one way or another on this?
No. And again, we have great relationships with the fire department and the city of Urbana.
Okay.
Okay. I had a couple questions. Can you take the chair, Dennis?
Yes, I will. Bill Brown.
Just on the ordinance itself, it did, as far as the additional training goes, it looks like most of it's around, sort of centered around the new National Incident Management System training. Is that something that they hadn't been doing before, or is this a new requirement that that the ambulance companies will need to be doing now?
So they do the training, typically like the 100, 700, and 8 series, the NIMS classes. What we added in there was the 300 and 400 series, which is for their supervisors. And anytime there's a big major incident, we, like all the incident commanders in the Unified Command Post, to have that 300 and 400 series. So that's just to bring their supervisors so they could have interoperability in the commands post.
So our staff takes the same training, so they
That's
know
correct.
how to cooperate better, basically work together.
So we're all speaking the same language.
Okay, and then on the response time fine, so that would be on any 2 consecutive reporting periods. If they fell below the 90% threshold of the 8 minutes, they would get a $25 fine. Is that right?
Yeah, and I would like to make a change for that. We meant to say any reporting cycle, and reporting cycle is 2 months. And I think that 2 was meant to signify 2 months, but so I would like to be able to cross out that 2 and just say all such calls received during any reporting cycle. Because
Okay.
we meet every 2 months to analyze those. And 2 reporting cycles would be 4 months, and that would be quite
And by
a long
comparison,
time.
$25 seems kind of small, so would it be just as effective just to issue a warning letter or something without having to collect
Yeah, it's-
$25?
It's very seldom that they get below their 90%. I mean, most of the time they're in compliance with the 90%. So the only time the fine would be issued is if they fell below that 90%. And it's just the fact that we've never had a penalty for that. It's like, you know, you
Okay.
fell below your 90%, but there's no penalty.
And then to quell a rumor that I heard, is it okay if an ambulance gets to a scene before us? Can they go ahead and do work, or do they have to wait for fire department to get there first?
No, it's truly a partnership, and there are times the ambulance gets there first. In fact, I mean, with an ambulance staged, one of the ambulance services stages at the corner of Illinois and Lincoln, and so if you would have a call at ISR, obviously that ambulance would arrive before the campus engine would. So again, it's a partnership. We both strive to give the best service to the citizens and the students, and whatever the arrival time, our people work seamlessly together. We train together. We work together multiple times daily. So
Okay,
it's a
thanks.
very good relationship.
And I'll take the chair back and recognize Dennis.
Yeah, and I guess then, for my own understanding on having in this discussion, then this, even though it seems like a very large fee, if an individual was going to be responsible for it, that would be something that would be detrimental to anyone. But any individual call would only be 1/25,000th of the total calls of the year, which reduces the amount that might be passed on in your bill to a very small amount. So the estimate that I think Eric made was that one call currently would cost 20 cents if it was passed directly to the bill of the victim. But if the fee was passed on and it was raised to $12,000, it would be $4 and some cents, 80 cents. You miscalculated.
Yeah,
You
just
wanna
to explain
clarify
here.
that?
Yeah, if there are 3,500 ambulance calls in total, but there's 2 ambulance services paying $12,000 each, it's $24,000. So that becomes 28 cents and $6.86 are the numbers to be using here.
If you paid for it in $10, you'd get a little change.
Yeah, and of course, we're also discussing the amendment to the ambulance services thing, not the actual fee schedule.
Fee schedule. Okay.
Diane, did you have something else? Okay. Okay, it's been moved and seconded to send resolution 2016-05-035 to council with recommendation for approval. and with some adjustments to come back to council, minor language adjustments. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Wait a minute. Are we doing, okay, you said we're doing the ordinance, or you said it was a resolution? Is it the ordinance?
It's an ordinance.
An ordinance.
It's an ordinance. Right, it's not the fee ordinance, it's the actual change in ambulance service ordinance. That's item 11 is what we're voting on.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay, so that's not the fee. All
that's
right.
not the fee yet. Okay. And
I think I'm okay with that. Yeah.
we probably aren't going to finish before 10 o'clock, so should we have a?
10:30 is our.
Oh, okay, so we have 10:30 and then we can extend it a half
Yes,
hour.
right.
All right, this
Yeah.
new rule is taking a while.
The Smythe rule.
We may finish by 10:30, okay. We did call for a vote. Should I call for another one? Oh. Okay. Let's revote that last resolution since we were interrupted. So all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. That motion carries. Next is ordinance number 2016-05-033, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code Chapter 14, Section 14.7 regarding schedule of fees, subsection A, liquor licenses. Elizabeth Beatty.
Hi. This is just the annual revision of the fee schedule. And just a quick background of how it's going this year. At last year's fee schedule presentation, council was informed that moving forward, we would be doing a different way of evaluating each fee. We would be finance would be working with other departments to evaluate each fee in just a more in-depth way than what had been done in the past. And we are currently in the process of doing that. So we do have some fees for you this year, but at this time, right now, staff is concentrating on reviewing fees in community development, building permit fees, and other fees that are at a significantly higher amount. So tonight, what we would ask, no action is required at this time, except to forward the schedule to the special city council meeting on June 13th for action then. And the fees that we have proposed tonight will generate approximately $180,000 in additional revenue for the coming year. And I've asked Brad Bennett to come up and speak just a little bit on the sewer and the stormwater utility fees. But we have liquor licenses that we're proposing a 1% increase. The ambulance service license fee that was just discussed, just a grants management fee, which is just a fee that we get charged to record, and then a live scan fingerprinting reprint fee, and then sewer use and stormwater utility. So if you have any questions on any of the first part, I'll take those now. Otherwise, I'm going to let Brad give a little update for you.
I had one question on the liquor license fee. You said it was 1%, but it would generate approximately $50,000 in additional revenue?
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that we
So
currently
there-
get $5 million a year in liquor license fees?
No. There are a lot of liquor license applications pending right now that aren't on the books, and a lot of this revenue is coming from the video gaming licenses and those VGT terminal fees.
So the increases won't generate $50,000, but the expected increase in revenue will be $50,000?
No, the increases for the upcoming, right, both, yes, that's correct.
Okay. Anyone else have a question for Beth, or should we okay, oh, Diane?
Can I ask about vacant structure fees, or is that not part of this discussion?
That is not me, and I think
Okay.
Libby's already went home.
Okay.
But there is a 30-day period where this is on file, so you can email and we can answer all your questions that you'll have.
Well, I would
within
just
that
like to know
period.
the justification for $250 for 6 months and $500 for every 6 months after that for vacant houses. It seems to me it would discourage people from registering those homes, and I just wondered why that fee is so high.
Yeah. That will be one of the fees that we'll be reviewing first off, so that's definitely something we can make sure that we look at closely.
Okay, Brian, did you want to talk about the sewer benefit taxes?
Sure. I appreciate the opportunity to come talk to you this evening. I'll try to keep it brief because I know the hour is getting late. But let's just start out with the stormwater utility fee. What we're doing on that is we're actually following a business plan that was created when the stormwater utility fee was adopted back in 2012, 2013. So at that time, our consultant, AMEC, had prepared this rate model, and I apologize, the text is a little small on it, but I can kind of blow it up there a little bit for you. But what I wanted to kind of point out was, if you notice where the hand is that I'm kind of circling over here, that was our initial rate, which was $4.94 per ERU. What we're looking at projecting out here for the 2015-16 year is what it currently is at the $5.14, and then what we're asking for as of January 1st, 2017 would be the $5.24. So the consultant, looked at what all our expenses were, what the number of ERUs were, bad debt. They factored in all these things. People not paying, unanticipated expenses, and they came up with this rate model. So basically we're following the business plan that was laid out and approved as part of the original stormwater utility fee. And then both with the stormwater utility fee and the sanitary sewer benefit tax, the idea is to increase those incrementally to kind of account for inflation so that we don't have big stepped increases on it, just a little bit each year. You notice for the stormwater utility, the fee is only increasing by 2% annually. For the sanitary sewer benefit tax, we're looking at a 3% increase. And I just wanted to show you the prime driver of that. And once again, I'll see if I can blow this up a little bit. This is the CIP, which you'll see more on the 23rd of May. But just to give you an idea, the reason we're looking at increasing fees is because one of our big expenses is a maintenance and overhead transfer, and this is for sanitary sewer, out of the fund into general revenue. So you can see, for each year that increases. So if we don't increase our revenues on an incremental basis, what we'd have to do is reduce our expenditures. So we'd have to reduce the amount of money that we are spending on our cured-in-place pipelining or on our point repairs or potentially like on our pavement reimbursement. So that's kind of the concept behind that, and really it's the same thing for the stormwater utility fee. Once again, you'll notice over here there's a transfer for maintenance and overhead, and once again it increases incrementally, and this pays for staff that work on those projects, as well as equipment, fuel costs, other expendables are all included as part of that.
Mayor Preston?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea to do it incrementally. My question is, how does it compare to Champaign now? Because we were pretty close when we started this.
Unfortunately, I don't have the answer. I will look that up and find that out for you, or maybe Elizabeth has it.
So for the stormwater utility fee, their fee is structured a little bit differently than ours.
Yeah. I know.
We have a standard rate for a single-family residence, and they have varying rates. So I actually asked them last year to go through and calculate for me a weighted average or an effective rate. So their effective rate is about $5.10 for a residential unit, which is in a ballpark. And for the sewer use fee, they're at $3.20.
Okay, thank you very much.
Dennis?
Right, so just for clarity, we have two ordinances that have to do with the fee schedules. And the memorandum that you've given us indicates that it's suggested that council not take action, but that forwarded to a special city council meeting on June 13th. But I've heard May 23rd. Is there a difference in what your intent is going to be here?
It has to be on file for 30 days, so May 23rd is too soon.
Too soon.
And there's already a special council meeting on the 13th, I believe.
So the appropriate motion would send it to special meeting of council on June 13th.
Did I say May?
Yeah.
Yeah, I meant June. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
that's-
It's late.
That's fine, but I'm reading and I'm hearing two things that are different. I would make a motion then.
Okay, so Dennis has made a motion.
I would make a motion to move both ordinances to 2016-05, 033, and 034 to a special meeting of the city council that will take place on June 13th, 2016.
Second.
At a what time?
Don't we have to do them one at a time?
Do we have to do them one at a time?
Not at committee. I think we can send both of them at the same time. Okay, is there any discussion on that? It was moved by Robertson, seconded by Eric?
Yes.
Okay. Any more discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed?
Do you want to ask the
That
city,
motion
do
carries.
you want to ask the city lawyer if there's a problem with this? I heard them conversing over there.
He said he was fine with it.
Normally, you would have a motion to consider these in omnibus fashion. You're in committee. This is not final action.
Real sloppy, but it still works. Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Efficient.
now we're on item 12. Ordinance number 2016-05-036, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code Section 1567 and 118, possession of cannabis paraphernalia and penalty, reduction of fine for cannabis paraphernalia. Alderman Ammons.
So, so we don't have to have a long, drawn-out discussion about this. I think that the rationale for me is that the fines for paraphernalia should be a relatively small fine and should be less than the amount for the substance in which we may be searching for or fining for. So I am going to motion to amend the ordinance to reflect a $25 fine as opposed to a $50 fine.
Is there a second for that amendment?
I'll second that.
Okay, so we have an amendment to the main motion to change the $50 to $25. Is there any discussion on that? Eric?
I can't help but note parenthetically that in transition from being a cigarette smoker to a non-smoker, my mother went through a period of being a pipe smoker. So fortunately, she never got arrested for possession of drug paraphernalia.
Mayor Presson?
Is there some confusion about that just having it by itself, you're going to have a fine? I thought it had to be in connection with a marijuana possession. Is that correct or not?
That's correct. There may be some paraphernalia that is very obvious, can only be used for one thing. I can't think of any. I'm not in law enforcement. I'm on the legal side of it. But clearly, the item has to be tied to an illegal substance. So having a pipe in response to, her name just left, no, Esther Pat, having a pipe with no residue in it, no illegal residue in it, isn't drug paraphernalia.
What if it has illegal residue in it?
I think one would look at the other context surrounding it. Is there illegal substance in the immediate area? I think Chief Conley could probably answer that, how it practically is handled.
So, Chief, could you answer that for us, please?
So the question is, how many paraphernalia events did the Urbana Police Department encounter with no marijuana, with just residue?
No, I'm just asking if a person was stopped and they had a pipe.
Filled with residue?
It had residue in it.
Is considered marijuana paraphernalia, that's correct.
Okay.
Because it has marijuana in it.
Well, and so how do you know it's marijuana?
because we have field test kits that we use.
So you would field test it for whatever, and whatever it came back positive for, then the person would be ticketed or arrested, or what if it?
Or nothing, or most times it was collected. I provided this information concerning the number of times where a majority of the time we have to seize it because it's illegal, but it was never charged.
Okay. So in a situation where a person just happened upon someone for whatever reason, if they was in their car and there was a pipe found and it had residue in it, the option is to ticket the person, arrest the person, or let them go. But typically, what happens for the city of Urbana?
Well, I would have to break it down. In the 16 city ordinance violations that we issued in 2015, again, we had a total of 114 drug paraphernalia-related events in 2015. Of those, 16 were city ordinances. 8 were state notices to appear. 34 were we took the paraphernalia into possession of the police, logged it as evidence, but it was never pursued criminally. I'm sorry, 56, and 34 were state violations where they were taken into custody. So that's the breakdown for the 114.
Mayor Preston?
Yeah, is this just isolated, that there's only thing in the car is the pipe, or is it in connection with possession of a substance?
The circumstances
Could be varied?
would vary, right.
Okay.
Are there occasions where they are found to be just in possession of a pipe? Yes, but rarely. Most of the time they're in conjunction with drugs.
Okay, thank you.
Dennis?
So if I smoked 4 days ago and carried my pipe that had residue in it and got stopped, but there's no marijuana apparent in the car or on my possession, it's merely just it's a paraphernalia, but there's not a charge because there's no illegal substance?
No,
That amounts to
because
10%?
there's illegal substance within the pipe itself. As Jim said, if you had, we go to any gas station and see the Bible scripts or see the rose in a bottle, those are crack pipes that are being sold, but because there's no crack cocaine or cocaine residue in those glass tubes, they're legal to sell. Okay. You can go to a head shop in Champaign and buy marijuana smoking pipes, and if there's no residue, it's not illegal to possess those pipes.
Right, you could be blowing bubbles if you wanted to.
Correct. Yep.
Aaron?
So of the 114 stops that you described, Chief, how many of them were actually had other drugs associated with it?
$34.
And so we had 16 citations, 34 state. So every time that a person was actually taken into custody, it was because there were other amounts of drugs.
Right.
Is that just marijuana?
Yes, this is just marijuana.
Of those 34, were they all above the 30 grams, or were they less
I
than
don't know.
30?
I don't have that answer.
So
don't forget 10 or more grams for possession with intent to deliver.
Right.
So 30 is a number that keeps getting thrown around, but 10 or more is
For the felony. Oh, sorry.
So I'm not trying to go off into that whole discussion about the amount of grams and all that kind of stuff. I'm just trying to understand, if a person gets stopped, they can, just with simply residue, they've got a pipe, paraphernalia, it gets field tested, it could be, the person can get a citation, or they can get arrested, but they can definitely get a citation, which is now $300. If they just had a weed pipe that had residue in it, they could get a $300 citation, right?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So that's all that.
Eric?
Actually, it would be 350. 50 for the marijuana and 300 for the pipe.
Is that correct?
I don't know how you're counting or what you're counting.
Oh, well, because we have $50 fine for marijuana possession, $300 for the pipe.
He said just a pipe.
He said a pipe with residue.
Oh, no, you would never charge,
You would never charge both?
no.
Okay, okay.
You would have to have a physical amount of marijuana, not residue in a pipe to charge $50.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
And so since you don't, of course, Chief, you don't set those state guidelines or whatever, but even from the standpoint of the council, if you have to have a physical amount for it to be a charge, then what is residue to be charged as if it's not an actual physical amount?
It indicates that the pipe was used for the purpose of smoking an illegal substance. Theoretically, anything less than 2.5 grams is considered a charge. Realistically, to scrape residue, just like we routinely find marijuana residue on the floorboard of a car within the carpeting, but we don't routinely collect that as evidence because it's commonly referred to as shake or residue on the carpeting. We identify it, that the dog alerted on the car, there was marijuana residue found, but it isn't collected, processed, packaged as evidence. It's too time consuming.
So when an individual gets stopped with an amount of marijuana or whatever the other illegal substance is, and they have a marijuana pipe or something like that, let's just keep it marijuana.
Okay.
Let's say it's packaged, it's more than 10 grams, it's packaged for sale. So it's a felony, right? And they've got a bong or a weed pipe in the car. That becomes what, a state charge as well? Or
It depends entirely on what the officer determines. They have a lot of discretion in what
for the
direction they're going.
paraphernalia?
Paraphernalia could be a state charge for that as well, correct?
Even if there was nothing in it, as long as it just had residue in it, then they can be charged, right?
Could be, correct. Yep.
Okay.
So any more discussion on the amendment? Okay. All in favor of changing it from $50 to $25, say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. Oh, I'm sorry. Any opposed? That motion carries. Okay, so now we're voting on the main motion to set the paraphernalia fine at $25.
Well, moving to send it to council with recommendation for approval.
Right.
Which I'll do.
And I'll
Second.
Or you can say.
It's actually already been moved and seconded. This was an amendment that we voted on, so we're ready to vote on the main motion. Is there any more discussion on that? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Next is ordinance number 2016-05-037, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code Section 117, settlement of violations prior to suit being filed. Increase in time for settling violations from 14 days to 28 days. Mayor Preston, Chief.
Well, this is something that we had discussed earlier, and it seems reasonable to me, but maybe there's other aspects to it. But this is a step in the right direction.
Diane?
I move that we send ordinance number 2016-05-037 to council with a recommendation for approval.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Marlin, seconded by Roberts. Any discussion? Charlie?
Yeah, in talking to Michelle Brooks about this, it was my understanding that by increasing the number of days, it gives more time for a person to get in and work out a payment deal, as opposed to 14 days. If they miss that 14-day window, they end up in court. So they get. If I understand, oh no, I don't understand it correctly. Okay.
That's basically the same question that the mayor asked. They are given whatever number of days you approve to settle to avoid going to court. There are no payment plans at this time structured. And from Ms. Brooks' discussion with finance, to set up payment plans would require legal and finance to supervise those payment plans. And in which case, if they reach a settlement agreement and they fail to comply with it anywhere along the way. It would not be an ordinance violation, it would actually be a small claims, because now it's merely a collection action. I don't know what the court costs are for small claims versus ordinance violation court. So the way it is structured, it is a chance to settle. The reason for the 28 days, that's not just an arbitrary doubling of the 14 days, but from what I understand, finance, every 7 days sends up a list of people, that have received NTAs and have, under the NTA can settle, a list of those that don't. So Ms. Brooks can, start ordinance violation court. I think it would be, shall we say, easier for a defendant. It's never easy, of course, but easier to avoid small claims court, because there are all kinds of ramifications in terms of collection of that, everything from garnishments to who knows what somebody wants to do to collect it. That's not to say the city would necessarily do that, but the range of enforcement is different for small claims. Eric?
Yeah, I'd like to suggest two things here. I would like to suggest, since the payment, it sounds as though from what you're saying, Jim, although I don't quite get it, I would have thought, you say 28 days, but you're saying that there's a statement every 7 days?
No. What it is apparently finance must be on some kind of a schedule how they do these. They don't just, every time they think the settlement period has passed, they don't just suddenly, shoot one here or one there to the legal division. However, if they have any at all, they bunch them up, and then, I don't know whether it's Thursday or Friday, they send them up if there's no settlement.
Okay, so it kind of makes sense for it to be, see, I guess I would have suggested 1 month, and the reason I would have suggested a month is there are many people who receive whatever income they receive on a monthly basis.
Right, or
so if somebody's on that kind of a schedule, they would have received, unless there's merit to making it a multiple of 7 days, in which case I'd suggest 35 days.
There is merit to that, because that's apparently how finance handles these things, rather than dealing with them as they come in.
So I'd
they must
suggest
set some time aside.
Yeah. So I'd suggest 35 days, but also I think there should be written into the ordinance that I agree with what Esther Pat said. I think there should be written into the ordinance some sort of phraseology for the person to pay in full or to arrange for a payment schedule.
Well, that's a matter of policy.
Yes.
It makes the legal divisions work harder, but I think the real burden falls on finance, and unfortunately Elizabeth, I think, has departed. But they have asked us, have urged us not to draft a payment plan, but that's a matter of your discretion.
Maybe not to draft it, but we've also heard that whoever asks for a payment plan, it's arranged. We have heard testimonies to that effect earlier.
Generally, here's how it works. The settlement, you either settle the full amount within whatever period of time is provided, currently 14 days. There's right now, neither legal nor finance offers a payment plan as part of settlement. If it has to go to court because it is not settled, typically what happens, either as a plea agreement in court or after a fine has been assessed by the judge, the defendant can come up and ask to set up a payment plan. Usually what happens is we'll get a call at some point after that saying, I can't, for whatever reason, I can't make this payment, I can't pay it. In which case, then we agree on a payment plan.
Right.
And then the payment's, I believe, made to court.
Marion.
I would.
We
like-
don't manage
Yeah.
the payment plans
Right.
other than Leanne Traxel.
So I'd like to see staff present something about the feasibility of actually putting a payment plan formally into the ordinance. I mean, I take what Esther says actually pretty seriously on this matter. I think it is I think that making, I think people should be aware of that as an option. It sounds as though we accommodate that by a more cumbersome process, actually, if we already have gotten yes, because we've already gotten the person into court. So that is pretty damn cumbersome to the person who has to pay the fine.
Agreed, but what you are doing would be, in terms of, quote, payment plans, doubling or tripling the work, at least of the legal division, because what happens is if somebody does not make a payment under the payment plan, the city can go to court and let the court know that the court-approved payment plan has not been approved. Otherwise, if there is a payment plan before going to court, that means the legal division, Ms. Brooks, has to draft a complaint, small claims complaint, go to court, prepare a summons, serve the summons. I don't know what the sheriff down here charges for service, but typically it's $25 to $30 for service, which is a court cost that the defendant would have to pay, plus or a service fee, plus the court cost for appearing.
Yeah, if they
So
can't
you're
make the
going to
payment.
compound the amount due, and it's going to be a slam dunk win because there's going to be a written payment plan, and it's simply they haven't paid. And so the small claims court will issue a judgment, and then the city has to decide, do you want to collect the judgment or not? If you want to collect the judgment, you can garnish the employee's wages. You can put liens on property they own. You can attach property they own.
Well, nobody's talking about having them go without paying.
But it happens. It happens quite frequently.
I know that it happens, but it's not going to be made to happen more often by putting the possibility of a payment plan into the ordinance. In fact, it may happen less often.
As I say, that's your policy. I mean, it's the council's decision to do that. I would talk with finance, though, next week.
I had we're getting really close to 10:30. I did have a suggestion last time we talked about this, the possibility of maybe having an automatic extension of 4 weeks for anyone who paid half within the first 4 weeks. That seems like that wouldn't be a big burden on the legal department because you wouldn't have to come up with a contract. So is that something we could put in the ordinance?
An request for an extension of, let's say you pass the 28 days, for another 28 days before any court action, that would be far easier for everybody to manage.
I guess I'd suggest we send this back to committee or keep it in committee. Keep it in committee for another 2 weeks. It's Charlie.
Yeah, I was going to suggest something very similar. So I would say we do 35 days, and then some multiple of 7 days for an extension. But 35 days gets you out past the month, like we were talking about there. It gives people time to make just a payment in a month, and then we figure out what the extension of that is appropriate, and that's something we can get back from Jim. And I think we can get that back in time for next week, right? Could we? What an appropriate extension would be?
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure. There is, quote, an appropriate extension. I think whatever you want to extend it to, I would only request that all of this be laid out in 7-day increments.
Yeah. So how about 35 and 28? 35 days for the first payment and a request for extension for another 28 if they make payment of half. I'd just soon get this to council myself.
Dennis?
What about, 35, that takes you past the month, and 21? That moves things forward a little bit and gives people a little bit of a responsibility to, come to, start making some kind of decision.
We need a motion to extend the meeting. We have one more item, so.
So move.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
D-
We're still debating what number should be perfect.
Eric?
Well, I think it should be 35 plus 28 because that gives the person two monthly payroll days.
All right, that's fine.
So are you
Aaron.
amending my, is that an amendment to the original motion?
We're still discussing right now, but Aaron, did you want to add to
Yeah,
that?
I just wanted to make sure that I was clear that the window of opportunity, whether it's from 14 days now to 35 plus 28, whatever that's going to come to, what we're talking about is that the individual has the opportunity to pay the fine completely or to arrange a payment plan. Is that correct?
Pay half and pay the other half within 28 days further.
No, see, that's, I mean, if you're on a fixed income and you get a $165 ticket, or whatever that may be, right, for open can of liquor, that, I don't know if you can pay that whole thing in 2 months.
Yeah,
right?
My suggestion wasn't to necessarily cut off the opportunity of a payment plan, but just to make it easier to extend for a month without a lot of legal interaction. But
No, that's my point. I'm just asking for the window for the payment to be extended to, for us, from my perspective, I'm thinking about the particular incident that came to our attention, is that I believe that individual based upon what I understood about this situation, could reasonably pay such a fine within a 3, maybe even a 3 to 6 month period of time, right? But a 14 days was definitely not going to work, and I think it's questionable to think about 60 days based upon the amount of income and the amount of the fine. So I just want us to think about that, when we think about this,
Charlie?
My suggestion would be for me and Aaron to meet with legal staff and figure out some combination here that minimizes the impact on legal and finance.
And addresses an actual need, yeah.
There's one other aspect that hasn't been addressed if you're considering a payment plan, or for that matter, extending. I take it this would be available to anybody regardless of their income level.
Yeah.
I mean, a payment plan and the extension.
Why don't we meet with you and work out some of the details like that, and maybe Mike has some ideas too here, so.
I could just add one. I have talked with our finance director about this, and she has significant concerns about, that's a hard-working office. It's not super well-staffed, and that this would create a significant administrative burden to do this. So
could you specify what this is?
Well, the having payment plans, having to administer payment plans.
Okay. Diane?
I think at this point, if we extend this up to 63 days, which is the 35 days plus the 28, that makes it 5 times what's being allowed now. Let's try it and see what the impact is.
Mm-hmm.
And then if we need to tinker with it more, let's do it. But I think this is a significant improvement over what we have now. So, and we've got, finance department is ordering a new financial system. We've got huge challenges in the finance department that address basic needs in the city, and I'd rather have our folks concentrate on that for the next year rather than setting up these payment schedules. So let's see what the impact is on of extending this time, and go from there. And like I said, there's a lot of leeway actually on individual cases, and I've learned a lot just in conversations with Michelle Brooks over the past week in terms of the kinds of flexibility. So I would not support setting up payment schedules at this time, but I do think extending this time is reasonable.
So I just want to be clear. I'm not advocating for payment plans either. I'm advocating for a window of time that is definitely going to give the lowest earners in our community the opportunity to pay a fine such as a $165 open can of liquor fine without being unduly burdensome on them. That's all I'm saying. So I don't need a payment plan, but the window should be a long enough window to make sure that, look, you can pay it in this amount of time, and if you can't do that, then we move into other steps. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, there may be other creative sort of automatic things you could do. As long as someone's paying $50 a month, you could get another extension, but that would have to depend how burdensome it is to finance, and maybe that could be a priority of the new financial plan. We're paying a lot for that. They should be able to modify that a little bit for us.
We welcome any ideas, creative or otherwise. You're welcome, certainly welcome to come on up to legal, and we'll gladly kick it around.
So, Mayor Pessin.
Yeah, I think it's better to get something done tonight, and then you can perfect it as time goes on. But I think 35 plus 28 is a big improvement over 14. So I'd appreciate getting something done so we can move on. And if we need to add more, let's see how this works and see what else needs to be done, if anything.
Okay, I'll just move to send it to council at 35 and 28,
Well, we have a motion on the floor.
and we can get feedback from legal
So there
by
was
next
a
week.
motion already.
There's a motion on the floor.
Was there?
Who wants
Yes.
to amend it?
I don't think there was actually an amendment. Was there?
There was a motion by Marlin, seconded by Roberts, according to my notes.
So we'll amend that from 14 days to 35 days plus extension to 28.
Okay, I accept that. I accept that modification.
Okay.
Is that clear direction? Okay. Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
That motion carries. Now we have ordinance number, this is item 14.
This is going to take 45 minutes. This is just to change the notice requirement for a hearing, so we have to notify people within 250 feet instead of 500 feet. It's consistent with other notifications that are done by the community development, and also have a fine for people that don't get the state-required Bassett training.
Any discussion, or Dennis?
Well, okay, I think it's reasonable. So I would move ordinance 2016-05-038 to council with recommendation of approval.
Second.
It's been moved by Roberts, seconded by Smythe. Eric?
I don't want to drag this out very long, but when I read this, I wondered why. I could imagine a scenario where the server, it wasn't really the server's fault that he or she didn't have the Bassett training. It was really the proprietor's fault of the establishment. Yeah. And so I guess I'll put out an amendment to see what people think, but I would like to only fine the proprietor and not the server.
Is there a second for that amendment?
Okay.
Wait a minute.
No.
Let me
Okay.
think. Send it to me in email. And I'll think.
Any other discussion on this ordinance? I guess I have a discussion. You want to take the chair?
Yeah, Bill Brown?
Just on the notification distance, I think 250 is it'll leave out a lot more people, but I think also part of the problem with the 500 is with the apartment complexes is that from what I understand, the way you calculate it is if any of that 500-foot radius intersects a parcel that contains a big apartment complex, then every building in the apartment complex has to receive notifications.
Yeah,
so some of the buildings may be 1,000 feet away. Is
It was
that
a
right?
huge mailing, and a lot of it came back.
Well,
So
that
a
was
big
probably
waste-
because it was
big-
Aspen Court, and
big waste of money.
Out of 140 units, there's only about 40 occupied there. But
Yeah, but anyway, it seemed like a big, huge effort for very little notification of the public.
I guess I'll support this for now, but I'd like to look over the next week to see if it'd be possible to keep the 500. But only have it applied to buildings that fall within that radius rather than the whole parcel.
Oh, the whole building, you mean? Instead
Or,
of,
or a portion of the building rather than the whole parcel.
oh, okay.
Or maybe the whole building. Okay, the whole building. Is there any more oh, sorry.
That's fine.
Any
All
more
right, go ahead, take the chair back.
any more discussion? All those in favor, we had this. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries.
One item, I just want to ask people to think about, at what point do we stop issuing G2 licenses? We're getting a,
Any time you want.
well, that's, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'm nearing that point. I just want to warn people that I think we've got enough.
Okay, seeing no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.